the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Peter Cardwell on Drive. Thank you so much for your company this Friday afternoon. There's loads to discuss, and if you are sitting at home or whether you're out and about or whether you're one of the car dwellers on your way home, you're very, very welcome to the programme. We've got a really interesting story for you which I think says a lot about Britain in 2025. It's later on, it's a Talk exclusive story, and this is about a local man. There's a local dispute about how the local area is run. He is against what is happening, and he said very, very straightforwardly that he thinks that, you know, he wants to take some action against the local board that is running the local area. And he made a joke to his friend on video and said, "Oh, what do we do now? Do we get the pitchforks and the torches?" You know, that obviously happened in the ancient times. What happened? He got reported to counter-terror police. Yes, really, by his political opponents. Unsurprisingly, they don't have anybody to put up in response to the story today, but we'll be talking to him. He runs a YouTube channel called Jeff Buys Cars. That's coming slightly later in the programme, but honestly, it is so straightforward. He literally made a joke about pitchforks and torches and was reported to the counter-terror police. In fairness to West Mercia Police, they said nothing to see here, no crime committed, off you go. And that was that, essentially. We'll get more detail on that as time goes on. Also, there's fury as a hotel firm housing asylum seekers in all-inclusive resorts has paid £700 million a year of your money. Rachel Reeves says green rules have become absolutely insane. Maybe she's catching up with the rest of the country on that one. Ed Miliband slammed after claiming ramping up fossil fuel production would not cut Britain's energy bills. There's a big row with the Americans over that. We're going to talk about the pro-Palestinian teachers pushing the Gaza agenda to colleagues or their pupils in Britain's schools. That's at your expense. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. And of course, we will take all your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. Remember, you can give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV or follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can please remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, you can send me a voice note, or less than a minute please, or you can give me a ring 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss here on Talk between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us. Should say that Jonathan Gullis will be here between 7 and 10 tonight. He's sitting in for Kevin O'Sullivan. He's got the week off. Obviously, Alex has been there all week from Monday to Thursday, but she did the show earlier today. So Jonathan Gullis is there tonight between 7 and 10. So immediately after the show, he will be presenting with his common sense and wisdom. He was on the programme yesterday, and we'll have a chat with him just before 7. I'm back over the weekend as well from 10 o'clock, both on Saturday and Sunday. Now then, let's talk about a hotel firm housing asylum seekers raking in £700 million a year in your money. This is £5.5 million a day, 38,000 people housed in around 210 sites. That's the asylum bill overall. But this is one particular firm that is running activities like a singing class, English classes, preschool activities and men's exercise classes, cooking sessions. This is at this all-inclusive resort, 5.5 million a week, and free meals, gym classes, a games room, guitar lessons. The Sun has done a big story inside the migrant hotels that cost us this colossal amount of money. Now, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, says the taxpayer is picking up the bill for Labour's loss of control of our borders. Labour says the Tories let the accommodation system spiral out of control with 400 hotels costing us £8 million a day at its peak. Let's get some comment on this from Robert Bates. Robert is Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control. Robert, it's a huge illustration, really, a very detailed illustration of exactly the kind of life that people who've contributed absolutely nothing to this country are getting when there are so many people in our society are having their winter fuel allowances taken away, they're having their bills go up, their council tax go up, they're paying more and more for less and less, and there are people who want asylum. Some of them are genuine asylum seekers, but the processing that's happening here is taking so long, Robert, that these people are living the life of Riley in resorts that so few people could afford to live in for a week's holiday, never mind many months.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think you look at the pictures and you read about the kind of activities that these people are being given opportunities to access, and you think this is the kind of stuff that British families would save all year to have just a week. doing, whereas this is now the reality for those individuals. It really comes down to the fact that the asylum process, the asylum system has become so creaking, so slow moving that individuals are now staying in hotels for very long periods of time. Unfortunately, the fact that the Labour Party are now presiding over an increase in channel crossings actually means that those that are having to be housed in this kind of temporary, so-called temporary accommodation is actually only going to really go up over the coming weeks and months. Of course, they say that when they came in that they were going to shut down hotels, and a couple have been shut here or there, but others are also reopening across the country as well. And I think once we see the figures, we're probably going to hit 10,000 having come across the channel either this weekend or early next week, 40% up on this time last year. You realise that what Labour have actually done since they came into office is really put this crisis on steroids, and really to speed up the ease with which individuals can come across and to increase the pull factors of those that are thinking about coming across.
You think under Labour's watch we've actually gone backwards in this, Robert?
Well, the figures say that. I just don't say that. The figures say that. I mean, 40% increase on this time last year, and you actually look at where we are in terms of the national conversation on this with the Conservative Party, at least whilst the crisis was ongoing, they were attempting to put in place a Rwanda scheme, a deterrent, which is the only way to actually properly, once and for all, stop the small boats coming across the channel. The Labour Party have scrapped that, and now they're increasing the kind of pull factors as well. There's talk of legal aid being extended so that individuals that are entering the country illegally have a better chance of having their asylum claim processed. They're talking about expediting those that are already here, and therefore effectively granting an immediate amnesty to those individuals as well. So the Labour Party really, by their talk of smashing the gangs, have taken their focus away from what the real crux of the matter is, which is that individuals from halfway around the world are looking at Britain as a soft touch. Many of them are economic migrants, seeing that we are treating them with far too much generosity, really, when they're breaking into our country, and thinking, yes, that's my best chance to make a life for myself.
And the Home Office has said that it does not fund activities for those staying in asylum hotels. These may be provided by voluntary organisations. This hotel that we're talking about is currently being transitioned to a new provider. But we do know this has happened. We do know these people have had these classes and privileges and luxuries, really, that so few people can afford, as you say, Robert. In terms of the processing, how does it get better? In what way does the processing move more quickly in this regard? Because if people are here genuinely, if they're genuine asylum seekers, well, that's perhaps something we need to think about. But there are loads of people who aren't, and we need to deport them and send them back to their original country.
Yeah, and I think it really actually comes down to the Home Office's will and its investment and its choice of time and resources. A report came out, I think it was last year, that said about 50% of asylum applications that are being processed are not actually being done to a thorough enough level to properly discern whether the correct decision has been made. And that, of course, means that many individuals with illegitimate claims are being given asylum, and it might mean that a few number with legitimate claims are being turned away as well. So I think that it's a resourcing issue, but it's also one of political will. The state we often hear is, oh, this isn't possible, that's not possible. It really depends on how it's viewed by politicians, how it's viewed by officials, and whether they really deem that this is something that needs to be put in fast track and in special measures, and whether they think that a process needs to be put in place that really speeds us up. So I think it's a staffing issue. I also think we also need to recognise that the pull factors at the moment mean that we can be dealing with the problem on one hand, but at the same time, if people keep coming across the channel, that'll compound things. And therefore, you need to send a very clear message, and that is an increase in deportations, which the Labour Party would say that they're doing. And it is also the implementation of a strong deterrent for those that come into the country illegally on a small boat. And that is a third country such as Rwanda. Jane's
been in touch on text 87222 with the word talk under text, saying long contracts were given to those firms. Many of your audience have talked about the subject for years. Look at how long the contracts are. Then you can get an answer to many questions, says Jane. And she's right. I remember talking to someone who's an avid listener of talk, who told me he runs a small hotel, and he told me that he was offered full occupancy for 7 years. All he had to do was sign the contract, and there would have been asylum seekers in his small hotel for 7 years, every room occupied, every single night of the year, no problem whatsoever. And he would have been a rich man, and would have been earning even more than he could expect from advertising and taking people in for holidays and so on. He said no to that. I think he's a man of principle in order to have made that decision. But Robert, there are many others, of course, who will say, actually, hold on a second, this is guaranteed incumbency, this is guaranteed rooms being used. Why wouldn't we take the government's money in order to house these people who, because they're here, because they're being processed, need at least somewhere to stay?
I think that comes down to the government's procurement practices. Obviously, central government is, notoriously very bad at actually getting contracts at good value, and that's probably why, as well, this particular instance of this company that have, had a £700 million profit have fallen below expectations in the Home Office's own words, because there's no real KPIs, there's no real measure of success put in place, and we lock these guys in to huge lucrative contracts that there's no way for the Home Office really to escape without, because they're dependent on
even if there's a change of government. You're absolutely right, Robert. Thank you. That's Robert Bates, who's research director at the Centre for Migration Control. Andy Preston is with me. He's a political commentator and former mayor of Middlesbrough. Andy, what do you make of this investigation by the Sun?
Hi, Peter. Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
I think that it reveals multi-levels of crisis, doesn't it? A big one, actually, that is fundamental, that we don't talk about much, is the relationship between this and our national housing crisis that affects everyone in the rents they pay, where they live, overcrowding, lack of services at the doctors, and that these people are in hotels because there isn't enough housing for everyone, let alone them, even the people who are born and bred here. What I think is really interesting, I think the Sun is hamming this up, talking about luxury. Certainly the pictures that I see don't look very luxurious, but they're
more luxurious than many people have on their holidays.
Well, I don't know, Peter, but in my opinion, that's not the point. The point is these people shouldn't be here, whether it's 2-star, 4-star, 1-star or whatever. They really shouldn't be here. The problem is we've got 130,000 asylum seekers in the UK right now. Their asylum claims are being processed. That shouldn't be happening. The fact that you come here, you're kept here in very humane, generous accommodations, and that your claim is then allowed to be appealed and appealed and appealed, and even when you fail to an asylum, you're unlikely to be dragged out of the country. Who wouldn't risk it and try and come here? What we've got to do, Peter, is stop people wanting to come. I would estimate that 90% of the asylum claims are bogus, and I think that
quite a few of them do get through, Andy. About 75% of them do get through.
Yeah, that's right. I think that we're too generous. I think we tread with caution. I think that of all the people that come, and we're talking, 40,000 a year, maybe 50 if the weather's good and they come across on the boats, I would estimate that only 10% or 5%, maybe 1% of those would make that journey if they thought as soon as they landed, they were taken off to Rwanda or Albania or somewhere else for rapid processing that was likely to lead to being turned down. People are coming because it is an easy option. Anybody who's fleeing persecution, terror, threat of death should be welcomed after they're processed, but they should be processed in Rwanda, Albania or somewhere else.
It's interesting, quite a number of people agreeing with you there, Andy. Margaret says, two-tier care and Yvette Cooper never addressed the small boats. They need to stop rolling out the red carpet and find a deterrent. In fairness to the government, they do have this asylum and immigration bill going through at the minute. We'll see if that has any major effect. They want to smash the gangs, they say. Tim says, I'm Tim, a UK veteran. These illegal people are treated better than our troops. There's a lovely airfield in the outer reaches of Scotland. Send them there, give them nothing but food, policed by armed military. And another person says, make a rule that anyone who comes over here by small boat will automatically be banned from staying in the UK and will be immediately deported. That is the thought behind the Rwanda scheme, certainly, Andy. So plenty of people agreeing with you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, public opinion is 90% one way on this, isn't it? Even people that were typically quite liberal. I was against the Rwanda scheme initially, but I now sincerely believe it is the only way to save lives in the crossings and save our government money. I mean, I think we spend something like, the totals now on asylum work, about £6 billion. If we can deter 90% of those, that saves £5.4 billion. We've got a government that's scrabbling around to save 500 million and 200 million here and there, penalising all sorts of marginalised groups. We need to stop spending £6 billion on asylum seekers, spend a tenth of that, And the only way to do that is to deter people from making the crossing.
Okay, and thanks for your thoughts there, Andy Preston, political commentator and former Mayor of Middlesbrough. Thank you for that. 8 million a day at its peak. That's what it's paying for asylum. Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Just a reminder of that story in The Sun today, talking about people getting English language classes, exercise classes, cooking classes, preschool activity classes for children, English classes, singing classes, a citizen's advice, all sorts of different things. The red carpet being ruled out to asylum seekers, some of it at taxpayers' expense, some of it with voluntary organisations being involved. But how do we fix the migrant crisis? Let me know your thoughts. Use the break, make the call, get your voice on the air. Plenty of time between now and 7 to make your point. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in a second about Rachel Reeves, who is in America at the moment and seems to have had some sort of dose of common sense, perhaps, from some of the Americans. She says green rules and regulation around building has become absolutely insane. We'll find out why next here on Talk.
There's been a paucity of legislation which the government is seeking to redress by introducing, it's going some way towards parity with motorists. But in my view, there's a crucial piece of the jigsaw missing. And one of the problems is if you video in your car a cyclist cycling dangerously, what do you have? You have a cyclist cycling dangerously. How do you locate that cyclist? Well, you're not going to pull him over. When you have a car driving dangerously, you have a number plate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We've got a story coming up for you a little bit later in the programme, and it concerns a man called Jeff Thompson. He's a car vlogger. He talks about cars on his YouTube channel. Now, there's a bit of a dispute between him and a trust called the Malvern Hills Trust, really about how the local area is run, how the trust is run. He has objected to it, and he made a bit of a joke about it on a YouTube video. He said, now is the time for people to turn up with pitchforks and torches. Clearly a joke. This is what he said in the video.
So, Paul, what's next? What are we going to do? When do we start the fires and get the pitchforks?
Yes.
They're not the fires, because you can't have a fire on the hills, can you? I've got a pitchfork and we've got a torch. That means we're together. But then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're actually with the people that have got this type of pitchfork, and we don't agree with the people that have got that type of pitchfork. And people forget that everybody's got pitchforks right now.
He's clearly joking. He's joking about a local dispute that, guess what, is not that serious. It's just a disagreement about how the local area is run, a local trust that runs the Malvern Hills. What happened? He was reported to counter-terror police. Yes, really, by the local trust. It's a mad story. We're talking to Jeff a bit later on. You're going to want to stay tuned for it. But for the meantime, I want to talk about Rachel Reeves, who seems to have had a dose of common sense on her way to Washington, D.C. She is there for the International Monetary Fund spring meeting in Washington, D.C. She said it's absolutely insane that environmental regulation has gone too far and is now the biggest barrier to investing, even in green technology. She talked about the £100 million bat tunnel. Do you remember the HS2 bat tunnel? Calling it an example of absolutely insane costs that are added to essential infrastructure investments. We all love nature, says Rachel Reeves. We all want to preserve nature, but we also want homes for our families, our kids and grandkids to live in. We want energy infrastructure to reduce the cost of energy. And we want transport infrastructure. At the moment, the regulation in the UK holds that back. Rachel, if only you knew someone who could cut that energy regulation, if only there was someone in power, if there was only someone who had, I don't know, huge and influential means to cut all that. Keir Starmer, you, Ed Miliband. I love politicians who complain about things. You're the government. Do something about it. Change the things. You've got a massive majority. You can do whatever you want. You're the government. If it's insane, sort it out. Change it. Ben Pyle is the co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Ben, what do you make of Rachel Reeves' comments here?
Well, they sound good at the beginning, the outset, great. But I would never underestimate the government's capacity to turn their recognition of a fact into yet more nonsense. The hope that there's an outbreak of common sense in Westminster is, I think, still a little bit far-fetched, and it's about the caveat she said to it. I mean, she's right. She's right that there are so many green regulations and so many green laws that nothing can get built, nothing can get done, and everything becomes very expensive. You have to build £100 million bat tunnels and you have to do equivalent things for all sorts of stuff. But she wants to make it easier for people to build wind farms and solar parks and solar farms and so on and so forth. And that's where she's addressing her point. She makes it sound broad, but that's what it means. And this is a return to the planning regime. Essentially, what she wants to do is return to the planning regime that there was after at the beginning of the last Conservative government, way back in 2010. And so at that time, there was a massive push for wind turbines, onshore wind turbines, and the planning laws were dropped, were relaxed for wind farms, onshore wind farms, that is, and it was called a presumption in favour in the lingo in the planning process. So it was much easier to build a wind farm than to build a house or anything else. I mean, I'm probably stretching it a bit there. You still had to do your environmental impact surveys, and there's the irony. It's the green legislation has been getting in the way of green developments. But anyway, this turned out to be incredibly unpopular, and that's why the Labour government that came in said they were going to lift. They were going to lift what the Conservatives had done following that relaxation, which they called the ban on onshore wind turbines. So this has created quite a lot of heat within the green movement, the green investment, the green business sector, if you like. That now they are fettered by the very laws and the very rules and regulations that they lobbied for.
I wonder, just when we're thinking about someone coming in the opposite direction, the Energy Secretary Ed Miliband in London was ambushed by a Trump official called Tommy Joyce at his own summit. Mr. Miliband, of course, insists increasing fossil fuel production will make no difference to energy prices. I don't know much about energy prices, but I know that's wrong. And at the conference, he was told by this official from the Trump administration that he was wrong and that this was something that shouldn't happen. It's been said that Nick Timothy, who is a Conservative MP, said El Miliband is on another planet. Richard Tice, who we're going to talk to a bit later in the programme, said if we started our own domestic production of shale gas, we too would have much lower energy prices. What do you make of this row as well? This is more consternation, this time in energy policy, between the Trump administration and the Starmer administration.
Those comments were fantastic, and they've been the points I've been trying to make for 20 years now, that whether or not there is such a thing as climate change, the fact is that climate policy is going to be far more harmful to people, to ordinary people, and to poor people throughout the world than any degree of any plausible degree of climate change. And that's simply down to the fact that, as we've seen, green energy costs more. It multiplies the cost that we would pay for power, from conventional sources. So it turns out that being poor is worse than being at the forefront of climate change, right? So the green maxim was always in the past where they said, climate change is going to be worse for the poor. What any normal person with common sense would hear from that statement is, well, let's try and tackle the problem of people being poor, right? Because everything is worse for the poor. The weather is worse for you if you're poor because you can't afford to fix your house. The things are worse for you if you're poor because you can't afford to heat your house. And these have consequences, nth order consequences. You get cold. You might be more susceptible to diseases and flus and things like that. If you're in those conditions, right? So if you multiply the cost of energy, whether that's electricity or gas or whatever, then you put more people in that position. But the Greens are very, very promiscuous with the facts. They only like to look at a very narrow section of the facts, and so they'll only look at the people who are very vulnerable.
Well, Tommy Joyce, certainly the America's Assistant Energy Secretary, has told this conference that there is no national or economic security without energy security, and energy security is not possible without access to secure, affordable and reliable access to energy. Net zero policies, he said, harm human lives and undermine health, wealth and opportunity. Also, the point with net zero, whether you believe in it or not, or whether you think it's a disastrous policy for the economy or not, if the Americans aren't on board, what is the point of net zero? And I asked that question. I know you disagree with net zero. I disagree with net zero, although I think we're probably on slightly different pages in regard to climate change in general. But the point is that net zero only works if everybody does it, if everybody changes their policies. But if you have a massive economy, one of the world's biggest economies, the United States, and it's not changing its policy, well, what's the point in us changing all our policies? It's not going to make any difference whatsoever.
Yeah, the US has been out and in and out and in of the global climate political process. China was never going to join, right? It talks a good game. I don't think India was ever really going to join either. And pretty much all of the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and so on, huge countries, more than half the population of the world between them, were kind of looking at the West and wondering what on earth our leaders, such as Ed Miliband, have been smoking, because these are such self-harming systems of policies. I think they sort of went along with it and went to the conferences and sort of made gestures. But the idea that they were ever going to risk the advantages that they've made in the last 20 or 30 years through industrialization and economic liberalization, just for the sake of Western green NGOs and what Ed Miliband says, well, that was just for the birds. It was never a realistic proposition. Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the 1990s, this problem of global policymaking was called the free rider problem. How do you solve the problem of some people cutting their CO2 emissions while other people just ignore it and carry on doing business as usual? So and that was never really resolved. And then what's happened since then is the sort of generation of politicians like Ed Miliband that we've got now. He believes that through his sort of sheer unilateral brilliance, he can create these policies, and the likes of China and Russia and India's premiers are gonna see him and are gonna see the green economic boom that we've created in Britain and all the green jobs, and then they'll do the same as we have, which is, I mean, it's just hilarious when you think about it, because of course all of our green technology, all of our solar panels, all of our wind turbines, they come from China in the first place, and we haven't made the domestic, green manufacturing industries here that were promised by the likes of Ed Miliband in the 2000s and by the Tories throughout the 2010s, that they said this would kickstart. They said if we created these unilateral climate policies, we went further and faster than any other country in the world, then we would have a domestic green industry. There would be green growth, there'd be a green boom, and it's nowhere to be seen. And by international comparisons, Britain's economy and Britain's manufacturing base is pretty much stagnant at best. If for the whole duration of the Climate Change Act, which was supposed to be the world first, the world leading first sort of commitment to legal commitment to reducing CO2 emissions. I mean, I think that the only lesson that Britain and a few other European countries are going to be able to tell the rest of the world is don't do it like this. It's a catastrophe.
Ben, thank you. That's Ben Pyle there, who's co-founder of Climate Debate UK. Colleen has been in touch on our story about those asylum hotels, the huge amount of money that we are spending for asylum seekers to stay in hotels. And they're not just there. They're not just sitting there doing nothing. They're not just there getting their 3 meals a day and their roof over their head. What they're doing as well is plenty of activities that a lot of voluntary organisations are saying, men's exercise classes, English classes, things like that. The kind of things, pool tables and football tables and things like that, the kind of luxuries that so few people actually have. Well, Colleen's been in touch and said, I'm sitting here listening to this about asylum seekers. I'm fuming. I'm a pensioner. I lost my winter fuel allowance, and talks of wanting to take the triple lock off me and my husband are not. We're not on large pensions. We worked. We paid our taxes. Now we've had all our household bills go up by 5% in council tax. You get very few services. Plus, I believe I've heard that the government can't afford the full amount to house asylum seekers, to have to pay some of the money out of rates money. The government needs to take away the pull factor of put a camp of tents at Dartmoor, 3 meals a day, no phones, no day trips out. I worry we're heading for civil war if we don't get the will to stop this. Well, Colleen, I don't think we're heading for civil war, but I do know that a lot of people feel as angry as you do, definitely, on this, and a lot of other people have been in touch. I'll read out some more of the messages later on. Jane says, perhaps all the people who want net zero should find an island, go and live their green life in cashless society, and leave the rest of us alone. I think a lot of people will agree with you on that one, Jane. 0344 499 1000. You can get your voice on the air and let me know what you think about that, about Ed Miliband, about Rachel Reeves' slight change of heart as well. Let me know your thoughts. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who's been in touch on the stories we're covering today. Sean says, why do we have to take anyone in? The country is bursting at the seams. Almost 800 million people live in countries where our stupid Home Office would automatically accept their asylum claim. Just say no, Sean in Bridlington says. Will says, we're never going to solve the mass immigration issue with a Labour Party in power, probably not even with the Conservatives either. No one in either of the mainstream parties has enough courage to deal with this properly. Jane says, perhaps the people who think everyone could be welcomed here should give up their house for them. Bet they wouldn't if asked. Well, Jane, in fairness, quite a few people have taken in Ukrainians, for example, over the course of the last few years. Of course, we know that. Lorraine says it's pointless discussing ways of stopping the migrant cost because there's clearly no political will from the Labour government to do so. Nothing will change and the taxpayer will need deeper and deeper pockets to fund it. And another person says, what does this government want apart from going back into the EU? Didn't the Chancellor say last week something on the lines of buying British would be so inward looking? No, not quite, but nonetheless it's a fair point to make, and certainly buying British is a good thing and we should all do it as much as we can. Jilly in Manchester has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Jilly, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I just wanted to make 2 points. Firstly, in my opinion, to solve the migrant crisis, you just need to do one thing, and that's stop legal aid. I have no idea why, as a taxpayer, I can't afford to fund my own legal cases that I need to do. Yeah. But yet my taxes are going to people that weren't even born here. Mm-hmm. They've never paid into the system and probably never will. And I don't understand it. And if we got rid of that and the endless asylum application and appeal
after appeal after appeal. I mean, my thought, I think I slightly disagree with you, Jilly, because I think everybody has the right to legal representation in some way, but you're right, if people haven't paid into this country, why should they have legal representation? What I would do is say, right, once we're going to hear your appeal, you're going to apply for asylum, it's been rejected, we're going to have one appeal. If that appeal fails, you've got to go. That's what I would do, because you have these people having 8, 9 different appeals. It's crazy.
But the constant 8, 9 appeals is why these applications are being accepted. Yeah. Because after 7 times, you just stop. Yeah. The second point I wanted to make, which is a bit controversial,
go for it,
is that from my experience talking to people, the reason why some of these migrants coming from specific countries in the Middle East are not integrating into British society is because their plan is they're not economic migrants, and everyone calls them economic migrants or legitimate asylum seekers. Those are the 2 categories. There's a third category, and that third category is people that want to come and change our society and change it to the society that they are coming from, which is why they're not integrating, because that's not their plan.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definite evidence for that, Jelly. There's no doubt about that. And there are things that happen that, I mean, I believe that everybody who comes to this country should have to learn English. For example, if I moved to France, it wouldn't cross my mind not to have to learn French or Germany or whatever, even if people spoke English a lot. And the cultural aspects of it as well, you've got to fit in. Yes, you're going to be a little bit different. Maybe your religion or your customs or your practices are slightly different. But if they're antithetical, if they are totally against British values, then they've no place here. Things like Sharia law, for example, I have no truck with. Courts that, you know, in the Sikh faith, for example, they have their own courts. I don't think that should be allowed to happen either. I really feel that if you come to this country, if you're here, whether you're born here or whether you emigrate here, you've got to believe in British values. You've got to believe in our way of life. You've got to believe in our system of law and order.
100%. I mean, I'm personally Jewish, and we're law-abiding citizens. The welcome that our community get and the peace that our community, well, it's not so peaceful at the moment, but that our community have to practice our religion, but whilst being law-abiding citizens, you can do both. They're not mutually exclusive. Exclusive. Yeah.
Well, I agree with all that you said, Gilly, and I don't think there's anything particularly controversial in that. I think there'll be some people who find that controversial. I would ask those people, what sort of society do you want? What are the key values that you want in our society? And yes, we're liberal, democratic, we're tolerant of other beliefs, but it doesn't mean we have to accept them. It doesn't mean that we have to change our way of living. And I don't mean white people, I don't mean Christian people, I mean everybody in our society has to have a common belief in what it is to be British and what our way of life is. And Gilly, I think, makes some really good points, and thank you for that, for those discussion points. Steve in Bristol has some thoughts as well. Steve, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Thank you, Peter. It's not focused much. I mean, I disagree with the way the asylum bill is run. I disagree with what's happening. But on a practical note, last week I employ about 8 or 9 people, maybe more, up to 30 at times. One of my guys was out driving in company vehicle. He phoned me and said, I've had an accident. Now, he can be anywhere in the UK, but I knew where he was. He was about a mile from the office. So I said, OK, I'll come and sort it out with you. Get up there. A 6-month-old van is completely trashed, written off.
Right.
When we spoke to the driver, couldn't speak English, refused to give his insurance details. Police were called. It was a little Ford car, KA, KI, whatever they are.
Yeah.
So I looked inside. It was floor to ceiling with delivery parcels. Okay, you could not see out of the side windows or the back window.
Yeah.
Now, as luck has it, we've got dash cams in all vehicles. The dash cam proved that this guy just pulled out without looking. As the police turned up, within minutes, there was a host of people there, same ethnicity. I'm not saying all the same, but same ethnicity. It was like bees around a honey pot. They stripped that vehicle of every parcel, put them in another car, and off they went. When we checked everything, he was an Iranian illegal. He had no British driver's license. He had an Iranian driver's license. They were delivering parcels on social, domestic, and pleasure, so therefore no insurance.
Yeah.
And I have since found out that the delivery office, I won't say where it is or anything like that,
That's
so don't
okay.
panic,
That's all right.
is employing a company to bring people in and deliver these parcels. And the illegals who are doing it are being paid 20 to 25p per parcel delivery. All right? Now, it is going to come a time when somebody is going to get killed. I now have lost all my no-claims insurance, company insurance, and my company insurance is £10,000 a year.
Yeah.
I've lost all my no-claims insurance. I can't claim off the MIB because the MIB have said, Motor Insurers Bureau have said, there's no way of getting our money back. Yes, he's being prosecuted if they can find him, because I guarantee you he's disappeared.
That is just so unfair, Steve. And what you're doing is you're giving employment to quite a number of people. You're trying to run your business. Your guys are out there on the road doing what needs to be done. You're part of the backbone of this economy, paying your taxes, paying your insurance, doing everything right. And it comes back to the question I ask so often, Steve. What is the benefit of doing the right thing? Why play by the rules? Because you're saying that. I mean, I would just be absolutely sick as a parrot if that happened to me, because that has cost you a huge amount of money.
I play by the rules. I pay my tax. Now, I don't care who you are. In fact, I have around about 6 Eastern European guys who work.
Yeah.
I say work for me. No, they work with me.
Yeah.
But I have about 6 Eastern European guys, and do you know what? They are brilliant.
Yeah.
They're great fun. We all banter together, we have a laugh, and we all knuckle down and we get the job done.
And the thing is, I'm like you, Steve. I don't care where people come from. If they're here legally, if they're here and they want to work and they want to do the jobs that we give them, and they want to pay taxes and be productive members of society. I do have a concern at the level of legal migration in this country, but individual people that I work with, there are plenty of them in this office, there are others who work around the building, no problem whatsoever. And they're good people who are working hard. And Steve, you're doing the right thing by employing them because they're working hard for you, and that's absolutely fine. You got to employ the best people.
I don't care who you are, providing you want to work and you've got the work ethic.
Exactly, and you've got the legal means to be here. But you're in a situation where someone who is not playing by the rules at all has scuppered your business, has caused you long-term financial pain as a result of not playing by the rules, and there doesn't seem to be any sanction for that whatsoever.
No, I've had to go and hire a new van. The insurance will eventually pay out, but there's no redress for me.
Yeah.
Now, what gets me is, if you actually look at it logically, he's getting whatever pennies he's getting from delivering. He's getting the government grant every week. He's got free travel on the buses. Yeah. He's got mobile phones, which are being paid for by me and you. Yeah. He's got GPs, and I can tell you this is a fact because we go into migrant hotels sometimes to do the job we do. Mm-hmm. They've got, 9 times out of 10, they've got an in-house GP.
Yeah.
I can't get to see my doctor for at least 3 weeks.
Again, it comes back to the question, what is the point of playing by the rules? Steve, it's a really interesting thought. We've got to go to a break, Steve. Would you do me a favour just before you go, Steve? Would you update me when you know what the outcome of all of that is? Would you give me a ring back and remind me of this? Remind me of this call.
Okay, I'll talk to one of your researchers, and I know what the outcome's going to be.
Okay, well, when you get an outcome, certainly give me a shout, Steve, because I'd love to kind of follow that up and hear the end point of it. But I think Steve's right. I think we all know what the outcome is going to be, and it's not going to be a good one for Steve. It's just sickening. It's just sickening. What is the point? I mean, Steve is doing everything that he should be doing. He is doing all that he can do to run a successful business, and he's getting a slap in the face after slap in the face for something that's not his fault and not the fault of his worker. It's crazy. It just frustrates me to such a huge degree because fairness is absolutely at the heart of all of this, and there's some people who are swinging the lead massively, and from everything Steve tells me, it appears that the person in that car, or in that van, was doing exactly that. Lots more on this after the break. Stay with us.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organizations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk now about the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. She's considering a one-in, one-out EU youth mobility scheme. There are also fears of a Brexit U-turn as Germany demands Keir Starmer lets young Europeans live and work in Britain. Let's get the detail of this from Professor Catherine Barnard. She's a Professor of EU Law at the University of Cambridge and a Senior Fellow at UK in a Changing Europe. Catherine, thanks for joining us this afternoon.
It's a pleasure.
What do you think of this scheme? Can it work?
It can work. It's a long way off still from being agreed. What's significant at the moment is Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, appears to have changed her position. She was very hostile to any youth mobility scheme between the UK and the EU. It looks like she's coming round to thinking it might be able to work because the eye is on the bigger prize, and the bigger prize is a defence and security deal with the EU and access to £150 billion or euros of money that the EU is putting up front to help fund defence equipment.
What would you say to people who label this a Brexit betrayal?
Well, it's not really a betrayal in the sense that this is not a return to free movement of persons, which was the principal reason why many people voted to Brexit, because they wanted to stop.
There will be those, of course, Catherine, who worry it's a slippery slope towards that, though, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. The only thing I would say in that is that the UK has a number of these youth mobility schemes with Australia, New Zealand, even with Uruguay. And there's no thought that this is a slippery slope to wider free movement. But it's the price to be paid for having something of a reset with the EU and in trying to improve both our defence and security cooperation, but also there's hope that there will be some sort of deal done on what's called phytosanitary, which is essentially veterinary matters, animal health matters, which will make it easier for British businesses to sell into the EU, sell animal products into the EU.
It's interesting because Rachel Reeves, who's in Washington at the moment, says that the financial relationship, the trade relationship with the EU is more important than the United States. Obviously, you're a professor of EU law and the EU is your focus, but do you agree with her?
Well, certainly we sell and do far more trade in respect of goods with the EU than we do with the US. Because, to put it bluntly, geography matters in trade, and we are far more geographically close to the EU than we are to the US. And so that's why it looks like Keir Starmer is tacking towards the EU, although there will be some sort of deal probably done with the US. Note that Rachel Reeves is calling it some form of economic agreement. This is not a full free trade agreement, but it might be something done on online security and perhaps making it somewhat easier for US firms, all about services, not about goods. Bottom line of all of this is that having some sort of agreement over youth mobility, it might not be called that, it might be called cultural exchange, something like that, but some sort of deal over youth mobility will open up deals on other matters which will be beneficial to British business. That is at least what Keir Starmer thinks.
What, in terms of youth mobility, what would that actually mean? Would that mean people coming here for a couple of years? Could they bring their dependents, for example? Would it be for study? Would it be for work? How do you think that'll actually work itself out, especially in comparison to other youth mobility schemes that you've mentioned, for example, with other countries?
Yeah, so it looks like it will be an arrangement for the under 30s, so sometimes it goes up to 35. It may be for a year or it may be for 2 years. Often they can't bring dependents with them, and they will enjoy a certain amount of equality with British people, but they will normally have to show that they have got enough money to support themselves and they've got medical insurance. Therefore, they won't become dependent on the NHS. And it looks like the numbers will be capped as well. And unlike free movement, they won't be allowed to stay beyond the year or 2 years. Under free movement, under EU law, you could stay for as long as you like.
In terms of the youth mobility, the discussions that are going on about trade and so on, how much of that is actually feeding into discussion in regard to the nature of defence at the moment, certainly in regard to Ukraine. The European Union countries and the UK seeming to be much more aligned on that, certainly, than the United States. We're going to talk about this a little bit later on in the programme, but from your perspective, I just wonder that it seems that this relationship, certainly from what we hear from the discussions between Prime Minister Keir Starmer and Ursula von der Leyen yesterday, seem to be going pretty well.
Yep, it looks like they were getting on like a house on fire, and the big prize is having a defence and security deal. If I could just take you back to 2020, do you remember those days when we were discussing the withdrawal agreement and the trading cooperation agreement?
I remember it all too well. I was in government. I was in government at the time, and I think you've triggered some PTSD there, Catherine. But go ahead.
Well, in those happy days, one of the things that was not agreed in the TCA is the deal under which we're trading with the EU now. One of the things that wasn't agreed was something on defence and security. Yeah. And it was always thought at the time that that was something odd because it's one area where the UK and the EU did have things in common. Theresa May was keen, Boris Johnson was not. But actually, it has left the table clear for some sort of trade deal. And because there's some sort of trade deal in respect of defence and security and fish and youth mobility, you may well find that something is agreed on the 19th of May when the two sides formally get together.
Yeah. Catherine, thank you. You've really illustrated that issue for me. I really appreciate that. That's Catherine Barnard there. She's a Professor of EU Law at the University of Cambridge, Senior Fellow at UK in Changing Europe. What do you think about this? Is it a Brexit betrayal? Are you happy to have young people from across Europe coming here, even if it's for a year or a couple of years before they go back? Will they go back? How much kind of faith do you have in that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch. Leslie on the pitchfork guy. We're coming to this story. Believe me, Leslie, you're going to want to see and hear it. Believe me, this is Jeff. Unbelievable story. He makes a joke and he gets the counter-terrorism police called on him. In fairness to West Mercia police and the counter-terrorism police, they say nothing to see here. Let's move on. We've got full details of that a little bit later on. Surprisingly, the people who did call the police aren't available to speak to us today. I find that very strange. They must have something better to do. Leslie says, regarding the pitchfork guy, how many were arrested for death threats on the Trans March last Saturday and we're told we don't have two-tier policing? Leslie, do you know what? Ryan, the producer, has actually just put in a call to the Metropolitan Police. We're going to answer that, hopefully, by the end of the programme. How many arrests have been made since those people holding up banners and placards saying they want to kill TERFs, killing people who are gender critical? How many arrests have been made? I would imagine 0. John in Lancaster says, did you see the government has approved experiments to dim the sun in an attempt to slow down global warming? Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous in your life? John, I hear ridiculous things all the time, and that is certainly one of them. Thanks for bringing it to my attention, although I read a little bit about it yesterday. Mick in Wallington says, Miliband is someone who has the facts, who has the proper information, but still makes the wrong decision due to a dangerous ideology. It is madness, says Mick in Wallington. Thank you for that. In a moment, we're going to talk, let's have a look at the running order and see what we are going to talk about. Yes, we're going to talk about these hotels having asylum seekers, £700 million a year to one firm of your money. Also, the pro-Palestinian teachers pushing the Gaza agenda to colleagues or their schools, that you're paying for that as well. And the YouTuber, we will hear in the next hour, believe me, about the YouTuber reported to the terror cops over a quip. It's an absurd story. You're going to want to hear it here on Talk.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going around that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I'll do, mate, I'll shove a five on the pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you very much for your company this Friday evening. Loads to talk about, including the story coming up later this hour about someone who disagreed with how a local area was run. He made a quip online and said, oh, we'll have to get the pitchforks and the torches. And then he was referred to counter-terrorism police. Yes, really. Some people say you can't say anything in this country anymore without the police getting involved. In fairness to the police, they said nothing to see here, move on. But the organisation that reported him, guess what? No one available from them this evening to talk to us. What a shock. We'll talk to the person involved. Jeff is his name. This was a very, very straightforward local issue in the Malvern Hills, and the police were called because of a joke he made. It is absolutely absurd. We're going to get chapter and verse on it in a second. Fury as hotel firm housing asylum seekers in all-inclusive resorts paid £700 million a year of your money. There are loads of hotel firms making a fortune out of asylum seekers and the problems with processing. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the pro-Palestinian teachers pushing the Gaza agenda to colleagues and pupils in Britain's schools. Who's paying for that? You are as well, because it's on your dime as well. Totally inappropriate. We'll talk to Nicole Lambert about that a little bit later on. Lots to discuss. I want to get your voice on the air as well, on Asylum, on the pro-Gaza teachers, on this issue of the guy who made the joke, for example, and was referred to counter-terrorism police. We're also talking about to Richard Tice a little bit later on. And indeed, Jonathan Gullis will be here between 7 and 10, and he's got a very special guest coming up at 7. I'll tell you who that is a little bit later on. Lots to discuss. I want to get your voice on the air as much as possible between now and 7. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss here on Talk. And yes, Jonathan Gullis here after me between 7 and 10. I am back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock and on Sunday as well. Loads to discuss there. I've got some good stories coming up for you over the weekend as well. But first of all, we're going to talk about a big Sun investigation. Our colleagues over at the Sun talking about raking it in two ends. The hotels have been likened to all-inclusive resorts for offering entertainers, fitness classes, guitar lessons, fresh meals. This is one particular firm, Stay Belvedere Hotels, which runs 51 UK sites. And they've been raking in £700 million a year, £5.5 million a week of your money, of taxpayers' money, providing rooms for asylum seekers. 38,000 people housed at £210 sites. The Conservatives Home Secretary, Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp says the taxpayers picking up the bill for Labour's loss of control over borders. Labour itself says the Tories let the accommodation system spiral out of control, with 400 hotels costing £8 million a day at its peak. Well, William Yarwood is a spokesman for the Taxpayers Alliance. William, what do you make of this? It's just, I mean, must be so many people like me completely baffled and annoyed by this.
Yeah, completely, Peter. I mean, the number is quite staggering, especially considering how ordinary taxpayers are being squeezed under a record high tax burden, their energy bills going up, you know, and the various problems they've had to deal with over the last few years since the COVID pandemic. I mean, it's more specifically on this story. I mean, it is slightly surprising to some people, but actually most of us shouldn't be too surprised at all, because this stuff has been going on for quite a while now. Actually, there's an interesting element where there's a local council element in here as well, where local councils have actually been handing over cash to illegal migrant hotels and illegal migrants directly to fund their PlayStations, DJ lessons, you know, driving lessons and so on and so forth.
Are local councils honestly giving asylum seekers direct funding so they can buy PlayStations? Is that actually happening?
Yeah, so there was about, I think it was a Telegraph reveal, there was about £400 given to an illegal migrant hotel and a local authority, which was then spent specifically on video games and PlayStations. There was bankrupt Croydon Council. Bankrupt Croydon Council, Peter, which has gone bankrupt 3 times. They've given out 3 Section 114 notices. They spent around £317,000 on extracurricular activities for illegal migrants, including, yes, as I mentioned earlier, DJ lessons. So local taxpayers and taxpayers more broadly across the nation will be wondering what on earth is actually going on with their money and why on earth it's going towards people who shouldn't be here in the first place.
It's a very fair question, especially as local elections are coming up next week. I mean, the processing is clearly the big issue here, getting these people assessed, and then if they are not legally in this country, actually sending them back. The processing seems to be the big issue, but of course the draws are still there, and we'll be very soon, I'm sure, up to 10,000 people coming across illegally on boats this year. That's going to happen very, very soon, I would imagine.
Yeah, completely. I mean, we had a record number of boat crossings just the other week with, I think, over 9,000 in one day, which was a record number. And also within the first 3 months of Labour being in power, actually, like, the amount of people in illegal migrant hotels actually went up by about 20%. You know, we don't know the actual stats for the last recent months, but I'm sure it's just as high. Labour basically...
It's over 9,000 anyway. We'll see if we can get the exact statistics, but it's certainly over 9,000 people in the last number of months, and it's going to go up. It's going to be over 10,000 very soon, I'm sure, William.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the issue, as you mentioned here, that actually isn't talked about all that much is the incentive element to it. I think Labour talk a lot about crushing the gangs and smashing the gangs, which doesn't actually really mean anything. But actually what they need to deal with is the incentives of why these people are coming to the United Kingdom over other countries. And quite frankly, Peter, I think it's because we're actually a bit of a soft touch, not just in regards to welfare, social housing, just the benefits of living in Britain more generally, but because we have a political establishment which, says one thing about this issue, but in reality does another. I know the last Conservative government talked very tough about illegal migration, but in reality dealt with the issue in a very poor way, and the Labour is doing basically the same thing at the moment, which is obviously a shame, Peter.
Although, in fairness to the Conservatives, even though I think it was unworkable, even though I think it was massively expensive, and I don't think it was ever actually going to happen, the Rwanda plan was some level of disincentive. It was some deterrent, and I don't see the deterrent. I've spoken to senior people in the Labour Party about this, and I've said, both on air and off air, and I've said, where is the deterrent? Where is the deterrent? There is no deterrent, and these people will continue to come across illegally in boats, taking risks to themselves, risks to their children. Some of them die. I don't want anybody to die, but I also don't want anybody coming across in a boat. What are you trying to do to deter them? And I don't see any deterrent.
Yeah, quite exactly. Labour got rid of Rwanda, I think, on day one of them being in power. Right. And as you're correct, the Rwanda plan had a lot of, elements to it. Was it a good use of money? Were any migrants really, sent there? The answer to both of those is likely no. But there's absolutely no deterrent. So if I may, Peter, I'll propose one deterrent, namely to do with the countries that a lot of these people are coming from, places like Albania, places like Pakistan. Why on earth are we giving foreign aid to those countries when the people in those countries are, going on boats, crossing Europe to get into our country? What we should be doing is saying, saying to those countries, hey, we have people from your country trying to illegally enter our country. If you don't take these people back as soon as possible, we're going to cut off all your foreign aid immediately until you take these people back. I think that's quite a good deterrent and quite a good stick to wield on the world stage, but I don't think our political leaders have the spine to do that, quite frankly.
William, interesting thoughts there. William Yarwood, who's a spokesman for the Taxpayers Alliance. Thank you. Sarah's given me a ring from Cornwall. 0344 499 1000 is the number Sarah has dialed. Sarah, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say about migration?
Oh, hello.
Hello.
First time caller to your show, so thank you for taking.
Well, thanks for giving us a shout. Yeah.
No, you're so impressive. However, I think you've taken enough calls now, and so is your show, to understand that the public have the resolution to the migration problem. And if the public have the resolution to the migration problem, does it not? Do you not think that the government do as well?
Well, I'm not sure the government have. I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But you can't. But you surely you cannot have that level of inverted commas intelligence in the cabinet. Without knowing what needs to be done.
Maybe they know what needs to be done, but they're not going to do it because they don't want to. What do you think? I mean, what would your solution be, Sarah?
Well, the solutions are there are many solutions. You just stop them. You stop them coming here and you send them back. We know. We've seen what Trump's achieved. It can be done.
They just need the will. They just need the will to do it.
The will to do it isn't there, and I get, yes, okay, they want to protect their jobs, and they're relying on the Muslim vote.
That's maybe part of it, but I think there are an awful lot of people who really, really do want to get to grips with this. But the approach of smashing the gangs, Sarah, I mean, good, smash the gangs, go off and do it by all means, but you've got to have a deterrent, don't you?
Well, yes, and all they seem to be doing, them, you know who I mean, is encouraging.
Okay.
But I just feel that if you can get to grips, and I really wish you could convince me otherwise, but if you can get to grips with the fact that your government doesn't have the will to return the migrants, then you have to question why.
Yeah, no, it's a very fair question, Sarah, and thank you for it. Michael's in Birmingham. Michael, what do you think of this issue?
Well, for a start, I don't even think there's any gangs.
I mean, there are, Michael. There are organisations that bring people across there.
Hang on. How many have they caught of these so-called gangs? One.
Well, there have been.
I suspect that what's going on here is like it's been revealed in the US. It's our aid has been taken by liberal groups here and dodgy NGOs who are pro-migration, and they're the ones behind all of this. I mean, look, if they wanted to smash the gangs, do those boats steer themselves?
No, they don't. Well, look.
They've got somebody at the rudder.
Yeah.
So identify them. They must be part of the gang, mustn't they?
Yes, they must, and they should be prosecuted for that.
And they don't do it, do they?
No, they don't.
And what?
Well, they do it to some degree. I mean, Rishi Sunak, for example, would talk about he thought it absurd that Keir Starmer said smash the gangs when actually there were about 800 gang members who had been arrested and charged. So actually his view was smashing the gangs is one element of this, but actually another big element is deterring people coming in the first place.
Yeah, it's just that gang smashing is going well, isn't it? And like all those people on the beaches, they've got $3,000 on the hip hop. They don't believe a word of it. They're being aided and abetted, probably by the French, probably by a fifth column here. The only way to do it, I would charge a windfall tax to all organisations that have housed migrants. Reform should say that when they're in power, 90% windfall tax on the money they've taken to aid and abet migration, and all contracts awarded should part of that money they should go to build detention camps. I would put everybody that comes in detention because they're all criminals. Everybody that comes in detention. and let's see how that goes. Rwanda was a lunatic idea anyway. I mean, that was never going to work, and it was never going to deter anybody. But detention might, and the best way to stop people coming is detain them when they come, and they're not going to be let out to go and crash into vans like that guy, you know, that poor fella that you had on about an hour ago. Get them detained, get them banged up, and get them sent back. Okay. And when they know that's happening, then they'll stop coming, and the gangs, if they exist, will have no customers.
Michael, thanks for your thoughts. Appreciate that. Michael in Birmingham there. Darren in Barnsley says, if we send the migrants back to France and France accepted them, could it benefit France as well in the long run, as the migrants would stop going to France? Yeah, Darren, it's a fair point. And France is a safe country, so why don't you claim asylum in France? You're meant to, under the Dublin Convention. Leslie says, hi Peter, you say the Rwanda plan was expensive. How much more does it cost keeping them here? Housing, benefits, etc. in the long term? Yeah, but, I mean, Leslie, it's a very fair point. The problem with the Rwanda plan was it cost 700 million quid and not a single person involuntarily went to Rwanda. There are 4 people who went voluntarily, but they might have gone anyway, and we spent 700 million quid on that. There were parts of, I remember asking Rishi Sunak about it at the moment in a number 10 press conference at the time, I should say, and I remember that there were housing sort of estates or housing facilities anyway for asylum seekers that had already been sold off because the people in Rwanda the housing developers were kind of waiting around for all these migrants to come to Rwanda. They never did. Tim says, I 1000% agree with the last chap you interviewed. Make coming here painful, says Tim. So thank you for that. Lots to discuss, including the pro-Palestinian teachers pushing the Gaza agenda to colleagues or their pupils in the schools. Who's paying for all that? We are, the taxpayer. Nicole Lambert is a journalist. I don't know about you, but I don't think I knew any of the political leanings of any of my teachers ever at school, maybe 1 or 2, but they certainly weren't shoving their agenda down my throat, and it certainly wasn't a pro-Palestinian agenda. Well, Nicole, who's a friend of this programme, she's a great journalist, and she's been doing some investigative work into all of this. We'll hear from her in just a second and get your reaction as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organizations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
Across the UK, DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, the Daily Mail did a huge investigation this week into pro-Palestinian teachers pushing the Gaza agenda to colleagues or to their pupils in Britain's schools this week. A primary school teacher who shared a conspiracy theory on Facebook that Mossad were behind the 9/11 attacks. I mean, goodness me, showing pupils a video which accuses Israel of apartheid to educate them. A maths teacher standing for elections in the National Education Union, and we'll talk more about them in a minute, declaring that he has introduced solidarity actions in West London schools in support of the Palestinian cause. Several teachers have reposted hard left articles on social media, including one from the Socialist Worker, which justified Hamas's 7th of October terrorist attack, saying the Palestinian people have every right to respond in any way they choose. That presumably includes raping people, burning people, taking the 59 hostages that are still being held in Gaza, that the Israeli state meets out to them every day. A religious education teacher in southwest London calling the Hamas atrocity a justified act of resistance. These people should be nowhere near our children. Nicole Lambert was part of the team that investigated this. Nicole is a journalist and works sometimes for the Mail. Nicole, where do we even start with this? I mean, first of all, great work. And secondly, it's shocking, but it's also not that shocking, very sadly.
It's very frightening. Teachers are obviously the most important people in society in some ways, and it's partly why when fascists take over countries, then they start in the education system, because that's how you are able to kind of change people's minds, aren't you? So the frightening thing is that people have been talking to me about anti-Semitism in schools for a long time, and it comes from different ways, but one of them is via the teachers, and partly because they themselves are being radicalised by their union, the NEU.
Let's talk about the NEU in a second, but first of all I just want you to illustrate the case of Nazia Abbasi, who the Mail alleged has publicly shared videos that push the conspiracy theory that Israel's intelligence agents were responsible for the New York 9/11 attacks. I mean, that's so clearly an anti-Semitic, ridiculous conspiracy theory. She's also been teaching pupils at a private school about what Israel is doing to Palestine. She last year reposted an image of an anti-Semitic mural of Jewish bankers playing Monopoly on the backs of the poor. I mean, how much more evidence do you want? This person should be suspended and should not be teaching children. What has actually happened, and what has her school and what has Nazia Abbasi said to you?
She has said nothing. She's a kind of freelance teacher, so she isn't working at a particular school. The only reaction that I've been told about is via private WhatsApp, which is that she's applauding. She says that she's happy to be in a Zionist rag and sees it as a mark of distinction. So the fact that this is on her Facebook page, this is all over her social media, it shows how shameless these people are. They're teachers, people know what their jobs are, but they're happy to share these conspiracy theories and talk about Zion Nazis and things like that. That's the frightening thing, how open they are with it, because they know they'll get away with it. Yeah, there's no sanction really, is there? And I find it very interesting that the National Education Union, which is quite a radical union itself, they have said the important issue is that, well, I'll read a couple of bits from this statement. The first one is the NEU condemns anti-Semitism and has a proud history of combating all forms of racism. As a union of 500,000 members and not politically affiliated to any party, our members will hold many different political and personal opinions, as is to be expected in a democracy. Taking part in activities or political meetings in their own time is therefore inevitable and well within their rights. And that's fine, but the point is that that's not what's happening. The point is that the children are being taught to think in a certain way. They also say, very intriguingly, the important issue is that when in the classroom the teacher's professional code of conduct is upheld and teachers are impartial when speaking to students formally or informally. I think we would all agree with that, but the fact is that what you've unearthed is that these teachers are not doing that. This is also a union, the National Education Union, that passed a motion at its conference recently to call Nigel Farage far right and a racist. That is, you can say what you like about that. Personally, I disagree with it, but whether you agree or disagree with it, that is not impartial. The union's own stance itself is not impartial, yet it feels empowered to lecture us about impartiality, including some of its members who have been far from impartial, Nicole. But the union itself is completely impartial. It's totally in bed with the Palestine Solidarity campaign, to the point where
4 out of 14 of the PSC's committee members are also committee members of the NEU. That's how closely they are. They're like brother and sister.
These are the guys who run the marches in London.
Yeah. And the NEU has had speakers at more of these marches in London and the rest of the country than any other union, almost than any other union combined. That's how close they are. So that is the worrying thing, because they are not neutral at all. They take people on visits to the Palestinian territories. The only other place that they take them is Cuba. This is a completely Marxist and obsessed with Palestine, the Palestine issue. So of course that's going to creep into the classroom. As part of my investigations, I read their magazines. I read a year's worth of their magazines, and almost every single issue of the magazine has something about Palestine, something anti-Israel. So they're radicalizing teachers, and the point of that is to radicalize in the classroom. I can't see any other reason why they would want to be radicalizing teachers.
I am, as I know you are, for free speech, for freedom of thought, for freedom of action. If people want to take part in those marches, they're free to do so. There's freedom of assembly, although I believe they're hate marches, and I believe that there are many people on them who are very anti-Semitic. I believe there are many people on them who should be arrested and aren't. But the point is that we do have these values in our country. Values, let's remember, that Hamas don't allow people to have in Gaza and haven't for the last 20 years. Nicole, I find it interesting that, I mean, these people are free to believe what they want, but they've got to leave their politics outside the classroom, and you've unearthed evidence that they are absolutely not doing that. What can be done about it? What should parents do if their children are being taught by one of these people who's pushing any form of agenda, political or otherwise?
They should talk to their local MPs or UK Lawyers for Israel. They can be found on their website. They're collecting instances of this, and just instances of, for example, teachers wearing Palestine badges. They're not meant to do that. They're not meant to show any partiality at all. And of course, it's very difficult to talk neutrally about various things, but that is part of being a teacher. So in secondary schools, they are allowed to talk about the Israel-Palestine conflict, but they're meant to show both sides. But if you are so radicalized that you are obsessed with this and obsessed with the idea that somehow Israel is the worst country in the world, then you're not going to be able to do that in a neutral way. Yeah. So parents should talk to head teachers and let them know. And I think that there are, head teachers that get this, but some of them are afraid of what happens if they call this out. And that's just one of the other issues as well. And then it's happening in the classroom. And so what we're seeing is not only children being radicalised, but we're seeing children being bullied for having a different point of view.
And that's something we need to combat as well. Nicole, keep up the good work. Thank you very much for speaking to us today. That's Nicole Lambert, who's a journalist who's been investigating this. Thank you to Mick, who's been in touch and says, we are paying billions to the EU to stop channel migrants and nothing is done. So how can we trust them on one in, one out? They will just send us more migrants. It's more madness, says Mick. Let me know what you think of all of this, including the pro-Palestinian teachers who are not being impartial, who are putting their points across in the classroom that are not in an impartial way. People are free to think whatever they want in their daily lives as long as it's not illegal. They're free to assemble, they're free to take part in those marches. And many people have said to me, especially my weekend shows, have said, oh, we should ban the marches. I would love them not to happen. I would love the pro-Palestinians to say, do you know what, we've actually made our point, we don't need to do it every 2 weeks. But actually, if they're marching, well, that is, to some degree, even though they're hate marches, even though there are many anti-Semitic people on there are many people on there holding banners that mean they should be arrested, and the Metropolitan Police need to do a heck of a lot more, and there are other parts of the country where this is happening as well. The point is that it is a manifestation of the freedom that we have in this country that doesn't exist in many countries that subscribe to the beliefs of Hamas. Certainly doesn't exist in Iran. Plenty more to talk about, including migrants, the EU, and this story, I promise you, is coming up soon, about the guy who made a joke about pitchforks and torches and then was reported to the counter-terrorism police. Yes, really. Stay tuned for that here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch, including on Twitter. Misty says, never stay at those hotels when we have paid to have them restored after these guests have left. Boycott them, says Misty. And Edo says, Nicole Lambert is in good company there with the Zionist Peter Cardwell clown emoji. Well, yeah, I am a Zionist in the sense that I believe Israel has a right to exist. Don't you, Edo? Do you not think Israel has a right to exist? Why not? Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We'll have a wee debate about that, about why Israel shouldn't have a right to exist. Is that what you're saying? Interesting thoughts there, similar to Hamas. Right then, Shirley in the Cotswolds has given me a ring on the EU. Shirley, you are very welcome to the programme, 0344 499 1000. What would you like to say?
Hello, Peter. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you, Shirley.
It is about the EU, but it's more about Keir Starmer.
Mm-hmm.
When they were in opposition, they made so much noise, and they managed to get several of our leaders of the Tory party out. Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss, in quick succession. And he has come in and straight away started on the pensioners, then the farmers. Immigration is going through the roof, and everything that goes with that, the safety of people living in the villages by the hotels, the money that it's costing. I mean, he is causing absolute catastrophe, and now he's about to take us back into the EU.
Do you think he's really going to do that? Do you think this is Brexit by the back door, or a U-turn on Brexit by the back door?
I absolutely, it's what he wanted. He was absolutely.
Well, he called for a second referendum, Shirley, but you don't believe that he's saying that actually, no, this is just one in, one out, it'll all be fine, this can culturally enrich our country and everything will be marvellous?
No, Peter, because how many elections and Brexit votes have we had now? And the people of this country have made it loud and clear that we do not want any more immigrants in this country. And one in, one out is just not good enough. We don't want any more. We've made that perfectly clear. And they're completely ignoring us. But I just don't know, Peter, what we can do to get this man out.
I think he's there for the next 4 years, Shirley. Although there are local elections in many parts of England next week. I think there are 23 different councils where there are elections. So people can make their voice heard in many different directions. I'm not advocating anybody votes for any particular party. But are there elections in your area in the Cotswolds, Shirley?
Oh, yes, there is, and I certainly will be voting for reform. But it's not necessarily to get the party out. I realise we can't get them out until, is it 2028, 29?
29, yeah.
This man... It doesn't matter which social media you go on, the thousands of comments. Even his own voters don't like him. They want him gone. Why are our opposition? Who are our opposition? We know that it's the Conservatives and Reform, but they're just not jumping and shouting loud.
Do you not think Cammy Badenoch did a reasonable job on the trans issue at Prime Minister's Questions this week? Maybe you saw her jabbing her finger at Keir Starmer?
I did, but she's still not coming across as she's not firm enough. I'm sorry. She's a very nice lady, but I just don't. I think at the moment, the way things are, we're in sharp decline in this country, and we certainly need somebody with much more of a backbone than
I know you're a Reform UK supporter. You've said that, Shirley. But if you were a Conservative voter, who would you want to be the leader? Maybe Robert Jenrick or someone else?
It doesn't really matter, because what they've got to do is get rid of all the lefties in the party. So regardless who's leading the Conservatives, it's never going to work. There's too many lefties in the party, so I think they're finished, really.
OK. Shirley, thanks for your comments. Appreciate that. That's Shirley in the Cotswolds there. Chris is in Epsom and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. A couple of things.
Go for it.
First of all, I think Reeves has deliberately said that Europe is more important than America to try and put Trump off of doing a deal. And I hope Nigel puts...
You think she doesn't want a deal? You think she doesn't want a trade deal?
No, Starmer sent... Listen, she may be Rachel from accounts, but she's not that bloody stupid that she goes to America to fathom out a trade deal and then turns and, while she's there, says Europe is more important to us than America. That was planned. That was a piece of underhand work. Anyway, That's my thought on that.
Okay.
The immigration, right?
Go ahead, yeah.
First of all, I'll tell you about a hotel locally to me, and then I've got an oven-ready proposition.
Okay.
But there's a hotel close to me that was a £50 a night, 50-room, builders, brickies, plumbers hotel when they were working in the area.
Mm-hmm.
The hotel was bought by a company 2 years ago. It was emptied. It was given a lick of paint, renamed, branded a 4-star hotel.
Mm-hmm.
The website went up, and it went up with the rooms advertised at £1,200 a night.
That's quite the jump.
That's quite a jump for a lick of paint and a new name.
Yeah.
The website, because I was interested in what was happening to it.
Yeah.
Because, as I say, it's 500 metres from my home.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the website. I copied the website down, because I'm a bit of a techie. And 2 weeks later, the website, that was removed. The rack rate of £1,200 a night was removed. And it announced that it was closed for the foreseeable future. And the very next week, it was full of 50 immigrants in the rooms.
Yeah.
So you can almost guarantee that what's happened now is the government's approached it to, or they've approached the government and said, we've got a hotel, it's £1,200 a night, we'll give you a 30% discount, we'll charge you £800 a night, give you for a great deal because you'll give us 100% occupancy.
Yeah.
That's the type of scam I think that's gone on there. And I can send you the information after.
That's really, really sharp practices there, yeah, it's very, very interesting, Chris. Chris, tell us. You said you have a solution to all of this.
Yes, I do. In amongst all these illegal immigrants, a lot of them, which were abandoning all their documentation in the channel as they come over. Now, there may be one or two real asylum seekers. If they're real asylum seekers, they won't have been their paperwork. Now, what I would suggest,
we do know that about 76% of people who come across in small boats are granted asylum in the end.
Yeah, I know, but that's because we can't. That's because they say they come from a failed state and we can't get documentation on them. All right, so this is what we do: the ones that are coming with paperwork, okay, separate them from the ones without paperwork. The ones without paperwork, we have a good working relationship with Albania now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Albania, in the north of the country, built 2 detention camps capable of housing 20,000 in each one.
Mm-hmm.
They built them. They had the staff there to work them. Everything. It was done for Maloney, for Italy.
Yeah.
But the leftist lawyers in Rome stopped her from going ahead. Those detention camps are sitting empty this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have a deal. We already have a relationship with Albania.
Yep.
All right? All the undocumented ones that are coming across in the boat, their feet don't touch the ground. They go to these detention camps until we can prove who they are, where they come from. They don't even get to stay anywhere in the UK. But that
would appear to make a lot of sense, Chris. That would be a system that, and then you could process them there. And you've got a deterrent there as well.
Exactly.
I know Labour have thought about this to some degree. I wonder if they'll actually do anything on it.
Well, I hope somebody from Labour's listening and they do look at it, because I do feel sorry for legitimate asylum seekers.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you know, I've got there's a young girl, 23. She works in a coffee shop.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a lovely girl, and she's from Iran,
mm-hmm.
and she's escaped there because obviously they have the moral police. Is that they call them?
No, it's a horrible place to live.
Scarves and all that.
Yeah.
And she says, rather like American CIA intelligence are saying, that the country's waiting for the Ayatollah, who's on his last legs, to go, because the country is ready for another revolution. To get rid of the Islamic State.
Well, we'll see what happens there, Chris, certainly. But I know what you mean. You do come across people and you hear their stories and you think, well, listen, we're a compassionate country. We do take people in. We've done that on a number of occasions, and certainly will continue to do that. But we just can't keep being hoodwinked in the way that we are. There's got to be a deterrent for people coming across in small boats, not least because it is an incredibly dangerous thing to do. Right then. As promised, we're going to get to Jeff in a second. This is a YouTuber reported to anti-terrorism cops because of a joke. I'm serious. It's mad. You're going to get all the details in just a second. It's the next item here on Talk.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organizations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We're going to talk now to a man called Jeff Thompson. Now, Jeff does videos about cars and he's involved in his local community. In fact, he made a joke about pitchforks and torches and a tongue-in-cheek rant about local politics. The issue kind of matters, and it matters a lot to Jeff, certainly. It's about how the Malvern Hills Trust runs, how a local area runs the local hills around him. We're not going to get too much into that necessarily because I don't think it's even that relevant. What happened is that Jeff put something on YouTube where he made a joke, and you can see it, you can judge it for yourself and see what he said. Let's have a look at what Jeff said.
So, Paul, what's next? What are we going to do? When do we start the fires and get the pitchforks?
Yes.
They're not the fires, because you can't have a fire on the hills, can you? I've got a pitchfork and we've got a torch. That means we're together. But then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're actually with the people that have got this type of pitchfork, and we don't agree with the people that have got that type of pitchfork. And people forget that everybody's got pitchforks right now.
What happened next? Well, the trust boss, Deborah Fox, reported Jeff's videos to the authorities, claiming there could be catastrophic consequences if the call to action was taken literally. How many people brandishing pitchforks and torches have you heard of recently? She also wrote to trustees to encourage them to be extra vigilant and remove their home addresses from the public domain. I have the letter here. And Deborah Fox, who's the chief executive officer of this organisation, criticised by Jeff, says, in the video there are references to the trust being like the mafia and going out to a garden centre to buy pitchforks and torches. The latter is a visual idiom of an angry mob, whilst the target of such a mob isn't specified by name. By implication from the conversation, it might be local councillors. We have reported the video to the police and counter-terrorism unit and local fire and rescue services, given the reference to pitchforks and torches, as well as personal concerns there would be catastrophic consequences on the hills and commons if the call to action is taken literally by people watching the video. West Mercia Police, in their wisdom, and it's not often I praise the police, I'm going to praise West Mercia Police for saying, do you know what, Deborah, cool your boots here, nothing to see here, you're massively overreacting. We are aware of the YouTube video, said West Mercia Police, which has raised concern amongst the Malvern Hills trustees. It has since been reviewed by officers who found that no criminal offence had been committed. Surprise, surprise. We recognise that it did cause some worry, and the local Safer Neighbourhood team have offered reassurance to the trustees and the staff of the trust. We will always appropriately review and investigate reports made to us. So they basically said, you're wasting our time. Jeff is with us now. He's the host of Jeff Buys Cars, the YouTube channel. Jeff, seriously, I don't even know where to start. Can you just talk? What I don't want to do is get absolutely bogged down in every single issue about the Malvern Hills, which I'm sure is really important to you. But just briefly, what is the issue, and how did you sort of get to that point where you put the YouTube video out?
Okay, so very briefly then, a concerned resident got in touch with me and said, did you know that they're trying to change the way the structure of the management of the hills, the way it functions? I made a video, 6 months ago, and I dove into it and I just thought, this doesn't seem quite right. And then a part 2 video went out, I think about 10 days ago, where someone else sat down with me. We went through the details of it and we both kind of agreed something kind of stinks about what's going on with this governance change that's going on in Malvern. So we made a video, we sat down, we chatted about, we basically tried to out the truth. And since then, what I've done is I've tried to get basically this bill that's going through in Malvern. There's a lot of people that are against it, but I'm struggling to find people who are for it.
This is going through. It's actually going through the House of Lords to reform legislation on how the Malvern Hills is run. But I mean, a dispute or a disagreement essentially over how a trust that runs the Malvern Hills is being done, whether it's being done correctly or not done correctly. That doesn't really make you Osama bin Laden, does it?
Not really, no, especially when all I'm doing is sitting down in my car, chatting with people who are concerned and people who know what's what as well, who have, read the information and understand it. So I then approached the Malvern Hills Trust and said, look, I've sat down with two people who don't agree with what you're doing. Can you send someone to come and speak with me so we can put together the kind of four argument, so we can have both sides of the thing put on my YouTube. Is anybody available to chat? And then initially they declined to come on the channel and talk about it. And then
just to clarify, did you do that in a reasonable way? You didn't shout at them, scream at them, say anything horrible to them. You just said, look, I'm making a YouTube video. Would you like to comment?
Absolutely. And as I've said in my last video, I'm happy to publish all of my emails just to prove that. Absolutely. No, everything's been done in good faith. And then I'm told that there's this email circulating that's been sent from Deborah to the trustees. And suddenly I've been reported to the counter-terror police, which kind of shifted gears on me quite dramatically.
It strikes me as perhaps a tiny bit of an overreaction. When you were saying things like pitchforks and torches, you were what prompted that?
Well, I was just thinking about that scene. It's from The Simpsons, basically.
I know exactly the one. I know exactly the one.
So that's all that was in my mind. I'm thinking, well, how far away are we from the locals turning up at a council meeting and saying, do you know what, something is wrong with this bill? And it's kind of an extension of what could possibly happen, because nobody, as you said in your intro, nobody owns pitchforks anymore. And my joke was, well, you can't light a torch because it's illegal to have a barbecue on the hills anyway.
You were clearly joking about this. It was actually pretty funny, but the joke has backfired, and the funny side has not been seen by the Malvern Hills Trust. I mean, do you have any sympathy for them whatsoever? Because to me, it just seems like a complete overreaction.
No, I really don't. I mean, I think they're up to something with this bill anyway, the way it's going to shift power. But to react in this way when you've got a local YouTuber who's just trying to get some answers and some transparency, and who is genuinely asking for someone to come on board and say, look, tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me why this person is wrong. Tell me why this other person is wrong. Tell us where we're misunderstanding this bill. But for them to react this way and report me to the police was it was a bit of a shock, to be honest. We had a pretty stressful day over it.
I'm sure you were pretty worried about it, and it's never nice to be reported to the police for any reason, never mind something where you're going, I disagree with you, and this is something that we have free speech in this country, and I'm quite worried about the attitude of people who do this. Now, we did, of course, ask the Malvern Hills Trust, but apparently no one is available to comment. That's a shocker, isn't it? The people, I think, have acted correctly in all of this, and it's not often that I say, well done, West Mercia Police, but I think I'm going to say that today, because they said they're aware of the YouTube video, which has raised concern among the Malvern Hills trustees. It has since been reviewed by officers who found no criminal offence has been committed. Have they had any discussions with you at all, Jeff?
No, they haven't. There's been no contact, and it wasn't until I spoke to your researchers earlier on where I learned that was the case. And I got to be honest, a huge wave of relief washed over me, because I've read in the news about YouTubers and social media people and people posting on social media and having their door kicked in at 4 a.m. And
did you think that was going to happen to you? Is that still something that goes around your mind?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm still sort of riding the wave of everything that's happened over the last sort of 3 days with all this. But I have to admit, the day that I found out that counter-terror police had been mentioned, I actually texted my wife and said, quite seriously, I might need to get out of the country here, and you might then need to fly out and join me. That's how serious the conversations were in our house, because I know the way this country has gone, particularly in the last 18 months. And there was a very serious moment where I was going, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I'm in a bit of trouble here. And which is odd to say, knowing full well that I had done nothing wrong and I had said nothing inflammatory. But to react that way and to the wife and I came upstairs, left the kids downstairs, and we're like, right, what is the actual situation here? They're talking counter-terror police. If I'm being branded as a domestic terrorist, this could be very serious. And I was genuinely thinking, do I need to run for the border right now? It was pretty scary.
Of course. And do you have kids as well? Did you explain it to them?
Yeah, I mean, the kids are 8 and 12, so they've got an idea as to what's going on, but they could tell that there were some pretty hectic conversations taking place that evening, that's for sure.
You certainly want to protect them from all of this. Does the worry persist? Does it continue, even though West Mercia Police have said, like, nothing to see here, no crime has been committed, no issue, it's over now? Are you worried about the next thing you say, or are you worried about the next video you put up? Is that playing on your mind as well?
It does, and it does force you to sort of self-censor when you see what's happening to other people that put material online. You know, my channel is a mix of light-hearted car stuff, different things that are going on with classic car auctions, but I do look at local issues. I do a lot with what's going on with low emission zones, and we've looked a lot at what Sadiq Khan is doing in London, and it does make you think, even if all I'm doing is a bit of, I guess you'd call it investigative journalism, it kind of leans towards that. But if you think, hang on a minute, I'm not allowed to expose the things that I'm finding because I think I might get my door kicked in by our own police force who are meant to be protecting us from things, is definitely pretty worrying, and I don't want to censor my content for fear of being caught out for telling the truth.
And nor should you, Jeff, but it's always going to be in your mind now, and that is at least the net result of what these clowns at the Malvern Hills Trust have done by reporting you. I'm sure you saw the story of Maxie Allen and his wife who had, his partner, who had 6 police officers come and arrest them. They were held for 11 hours for complaining about their kid's school. Kid has special needs, and they were complaining about their kid's school. I did that interview a few weeks ago. It was the front page of the Times. And the fact that people feel that they can report these things, that would constitute a terrorism offence, making a joke which was clearly a joke. There's no doubt about that. In fact, let's just watch the clip one more time. There'll be people who've perhaps just picked up this discussion halfway through. This is exactly the reason. This is the clip of why Jeff was reported to counter-terrorism police. A local dispute, something which he was having his opinion about, broadcasting it on his YouTube channel, and this is exactly what he said that got him reported to counter-terrorism police. Let's play it again.
So, Paul, what's next? What are we going to do? When do we start the fires and get the pitchforks?
Yes.
They're not the fires, because you can't have a fire on the hills, can you? I've got a pitchfork and we've got a torch. That means we're together. But then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're actually with the people that have got this type of pitchfork, and we don't agree with the people that have got that type of pitchfork. And people forget that everybody's got pitchforks right now.
So Deborah Fox is the Chief Executive Officer of the Malvern Hills Trust. We did ask the Malvern Hills Trust for an interview. They said no one was available. Surprise, surprise. What I'm going to do to try and give them their say is read out almost all of this letter that they had. I'm not going to read every single bit of it, but I'll read most of it. Dear Trustee, I want to inform you that there's a Jeff Buys Cars YouTube video in circulation that involves one of our trustees. The material was published by vlogger Jeff Buys Cars on the 16th of April. A transcript of the conversation is attached for your reference. The vlogger, who's based in Worcestershire, is now emailing the trust offices asking for a comment. A vlogger isn't regulated in the same way as a journalist, and they could turn up on home doorsteps, etc., wanting you to speak with them. Well, journalists can do that too. Nobody is authorised to speak on behalf of the trust with this individual, who also goes by his name Jeff Thompson. I mean, that is your name. If approached, your only reply is no comment, and that is in bold and underlined. May we also remind all trustees that Section 14 of the Code of Conduct requires you, in advance of making any public comment, to contact the CEO in order to ensure the comment you propose is factually correct. In the video, there are references to the trust being like the mafia and going out to a garden centre to buy pitchforks and torches. The latter is a visual idiom of an angry mob. Whilst the target of such a mob isn't specified by name, the implication of the conversation, it might be local councillors or on the board trust, or potentially staff of the trust who are targeted. If your address is in the public domain, you might want to consider changing it. We've reported the video to the police and counter-terrorism unit and local fire and rescue services, given the reference to pitchforks and torches, as well as the personal concerns. There would be catastrophic consequences on the hills and commons if the call to action is taken literally by people watching the video. What has happened now, because of what is this? Have you heard of the Streisand effect, George? Jeff, are you familiar with the Streisand effect?
Yeah, a lot of people were commenting on my video saying this is the Streisand effect in action, and yes. I had to Google it, but yes, I now have.
So briefly, Barbara Streisand didn't want her house in a big public thing, and by saying I don't want my house in a big public thing, it then became everyone now knows where Barbara Streisand's house is. And what Deborah Fox has done now is drawn attention to what I believe is her completely over the top, ridiculous reaction to the comments of someone she disagrees with. And she disagrees with you. I mean, why doesn't she just have a conversation with you? Why doesn't she just come on your YouTube and say, Jeff, I disagree with you, I think you're wrong, and here's why?
I'd absolutely love that. I'd love someone to pick through both the videos that I've made and pick out the points and say, you're wrong about this because of X, Y, Z. And in my response, I did a video response to her letter. I said, well, look, all I've ever done is invite you to come and chat with me. But the thing was, going back to, the couple that you discussed, they had, 6 police kicked down their door at 3 in the morning. I had that in mind when we were going through this. I was thinking, hang on a minute, they had their door kicked in for WhatsApp messages, but with me, they're using the T word. They're talking about terrorism. And I'm thinking, I'm going to have a SWAT team at the door. So it was, yeah, pretty scary stuff. But I do like that the heavy-handed tactics have meant that more and more people are learning about what's going on in Malvern. And now here we are talking about it on live TV, whereas last week, not many people knew this was going on at all.
I know a lot more about the Malvern Hills Trust and how they operate and the bill going through the House of Lords in regard to the changes to the Malvern Hills Trust. So really, the Streisand effect, I think, is in serious action here. And Deborah Fox, known far more than she was a week ago. Jeff, I wish you and your family well. I hope this nonsense calms down. Take the kids out for an ice cream this weekend and try and put this behind you. And good luck in having that conversation. If you ever have that discussion with Deborah Fox, or if she ever wants to come on this programme, she's very welcome to do so. Jeff, all the best to you. And I mean, it's beyond parody. That's Jeff Thompson there. He's the host of Jeff Buys Cars, the YouTube channel, a channel for cars conversation, current affairs and coffee. Lots to discuss on this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently going to build it in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the Pip Parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. What about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. We're going to speak to Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, in just a second about all sorts of things, about the hotel the hotel group that's being paid £700 million a year of your money to get asylum seekers housed, and also giving them classes, giving them treats, doing all sorts of things to make their life, in many cases, better than many people in this country. We'll also talk about Rachel Reeves. She says the EU trade relationship more important than the US. I'll be very interested in terms of what Richard thinks about that. Also, we're going to talk about the story we just heard about the man who made a joke about pitchforks and torches and was reported to the counter-terror police. Lots to discuss this hour. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a call. 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. And Jonathan Gullis will be here between 7 and 10. I'll be talking to him a bit later on this hour about what's coming up in his programme. I know one of his guests is Michael Gove, the editor of The Spectator and former Cabinet Minister. Lots of people getting in touch about the story we've just done. Leslie says, is there no action against the person who made vexatious claims against Jeff? This would stop other dangerous reporting. Carl says, anyone stupid enough to take something like that literally wouldn't understand the angry mob reference anyway. Terence says, there used to be an offence called wasting police time. If it still exists, this is a prime candidate for it. Let's get Richard Tice's reaction. Richard is, of course, the MP for Boston and Deputy Leader of Reform UK. Richard, I know you are across this story of Jeff Thompson, who made a joke. In fact, just before I ask your thoughts on this, let's just remind ourselves exactly what Jeff said, then I'll find out what Richard thinks about it.
So, Paul, what's next? What are we going to do? When do we start the fires and get the pitchforks?
Yes.
They're not the fires, because you can't have a fire on the hills, can you? I've got a pitchfork and we've got a torch. That means we're together. But then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're actually with the people that have got this type of pitchfork, and we don't agree with the people that have got that type of pitchfork. And people forget that everybody's got pitchforks right now.
Richard, the Malvern Hills Trust, who remarkably didn't have anyone to speak to us today, funny that, decided to report Jeff to the counter-terrorism police for that comment. What do you think?
Well, I can confirm that I do not have a pitchfork with me.
Do you have a torch, though?
I must say, it was just a good, humorous bit of banter. And I suppose trying to be optimistic about this, the good news is that we have seen, it appears, the application of good old-fashioned common sense from a police force. And I think we should celebrate that, because it's a rarity in the current environment.
You're absolutely right, Richard. We have the West Mercia Police saying we're aware of the video. It's raised concern with the Malvern Hills trustees. It has since been reviewed by officers who found that no criminal offence has been committed. Case closed, off you go, load of nonsense, move on.
Yeah, and let's hope they made that very quickly, because it is a waste of police time. And I think actually people should understand that if you're going to make these absurd complaints to the police, then they may well come after you for such lunacy. But yeah, it's just let's hope there's a lot more of that common sense coming from the police up and down the country.
I totally agree with you, Richard. I wonder, just speaking of common sense, whether you think Rachel Reeves has common sense when she says the EU trade relationship is more important than the United States. She's at the International Monetary Fund conference in Washington, D.C. at the moment.
Well, we know that Rachel Reeves has no common sense whatsoever. The only thing she seems to understand is how to screw up an economy by her blunder budget last October, and then sort of doubling down with her spring statement. I mean, let's be real. We have just seen government borrowing numbers 2 days ago announced that were 15 billion higher than the OBR forecast just 4 weeks ago. And I'm very concerned, as are all Brexiteers, about the cozying up to the failing recessionary EU, no less, by this Labour government. I mean, if the EU was booming away with fantastic growth and we were spluttering along like some clapped-out engine with no fuel in it, then you might have reason to say we should get closer to the EU. But the EU's economies are doing even worse than we are, and we're going nowhere, slowly. So we should be distancing ourselves as much as possible from the EU. We should be deregulating, we should be cutting wasteful, daft spending, and lowering taxes. And I'm particularly concerned next month, Peter, about this proposed sort of defence summit with the EU, talk of getting ever closer union, talk of getting closer on food standards, on veterinary standards. All of this is absolutely bonkers, absurd, nuts. We should be distancing ourselves. We need to be smartly regulated. We should be competing with Asia, competing with the US. They're the high growth economies. That's what we want to aspire to. And frankly, a trade deal with the US would be nice. But I suspect that what's doable is a partial trade deal. There'll be stuff you can agree and stuff you can't. I just do want to knock on this ridiculous nonsense talked about chlorinated chicken from people. First of all, any sane person who tastes some of that sort of chicken that comes out of the US, it's not a patch on fantastic British organic chicken. So I think people will sort of make the mind up, pays the choice based on smart British labelling. And secondly, we've got lots of other important issues to focus on with the US, and I think we can do some partial trade deals. And just to remind people, you do realise that most of your salad, if you get salad in a bag from a supermarket, guess what it's washed in, folks?
Well, indeed.
You better. Chlorine.
And interesting you mentioned there about the Defence Summit. We remember, of course, that Chesney Hawkes lookalike Ursula von der Leyen was the Defence Minister of Germany when they ran out of weapons in the German army. So
that's what you need your pitchfork for.
Yes, the German army. Maybe she'll supply them with pitchforks. Well, you never know. Let's talk about this investigation by our colleagues over at the Sun newspaper. This is one hotel firm housing asylum seekers in an all-inclusive resort, paid £700 million a year. Some of the things that they are being allowed to do: exercise classes, English classes, Citizens Advice Bureau sessions, their table football playstations. There are all sorts of things in those hotels that there are many people couldn't afford to do, or even pay for a class to do themselves if they wanted to in this country. There are many pensioners who have huge amounts of money taken away from them, Richard, and it just comes down, I think, to fairness. Those people have, whether they're legitimate asylum seekers or not, they have not contributed anything to this country, yet they're being given rich rewards for not doing so.
Well, I think you and I, Peter, must be in the wrong business, because clearly being in the hotel business, letting them out on vast contracts, vastly rich, rewarding contracts to the Home Office is the business to be in. It's a high growth business, sadly, because we're all paying for it. And it is an absolute outrage that these people who've come here illegally, they've broken the laws, they've paid smugglers, possibly borrowed money, but they basically paid these smugglers, and they're coming and basically abusing our generosity and hospitality. And I tell you, the anger on the streets about this, up and down the country, is significant. I hear it all the time. And look, the only way to deal with it is to process people within a couple of weeks of them arriving illegally, and you make it very clear that no one who comes illegally is going to be granted asylum, full stop. And you give them a week to appeal, and then you deport them. It's quite, we know it works, actually, and we know it can be done, because credit where credit's due, in the 2000s, that's what the last Labour government did. They were deporting about 40,000 people a year. They were processing applications in 2 weeks. I don't quite understand why it's now taken this current Labour government so long. And in fact, smashing the gangs isn't working out so well. It seems to have increased the number of people coming here illegally by over 30%. I think we've had well over 30,000 arrive since the election, and that's why all these hoteliers are making huge profits, because the government has got to put them somewhere, because they're not processing them quickly. They're not doing what we would do, which is to leave the ECHR and to pick up and safely take back, which we're legally entitled to do under the 1982 UN Convention of the Law of Sea. It's not a very interesting read, but I have read the treaty. I know the clauses. It's not a Jilly Cooper, but I have to tell you, it can be done with the right political leadership and courage. It
may not be a Jilly Cooper, but certainly your rivals in the Labour Party perhaps need to read it. Tell me, Richard, what you think about Yvette Cooper, not Jilly Cooper, but Yvette Cooper, who is apparently thinking about this one in, one out EU plan in regard to youth mobility visas. Some people say that's an erosion of Brexit by the back door. Other people say actually it's not that big a deal, because we send people to Europe, they come back, we allow them to work there and study there. What are your thoughts on this?
It's actually a huge deal, because let's remember the vast majority of the freedom of movement that took place was with people under the age of 30, and this is just it's the sort of it's the first sort of opening of the door, and then they'll just push it ever further, and all of a sudden it'll be, under 35, under 40, don't worry about it. It's not for 12 months, it's for 36 months. This is the thin end of the wedge, and we shouldn't allow it whatsoever. We need to train our own people. We don't need any more people in the UK. We've got the biggest population ever. We haven't got a shortage of people. We've got a shortage of people willing to work, because for too many people, it pays to stay on benefits that are tax-free. And we've got hundreds of thousands of people now, if not millions of people, basically finding that actually going to work doesn't pay, rather than sitting at home and claiming benefits. We want a world-leading benefit system for the genuinely disabled, the genuinely vulnerable, and those genuinely looking for work. For those who make a lifestyle choice to sit on their backside and do zip at someone else's expense, our hard-working taxpayers' expense, frankly, that's not on. And under a reform government, that would stop pretty sharpish, let me tell you.
OK, Richard, thank you very much. That's Richard Tice MP, he's Deputy Leader of Reform UK, the MP for Boston in Skegness in Lancashire, and Lincolnshire, sorry, apologies. You let me know what you think about what Richard had to say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. That's the number John has called from Crewe, not about what Richard has said, but our earlier discussion on the pro-Palestinian teachers. John, what did you make of that discussion and those revelations by Nicole Lambert and the team at the Mail?
I've got very strong views about it, Peter. If I can say now, I'm coming up for my 8th 10-year passport, which not many people have reached that.
Yeah.
And during that time, I have the benefit, if that's the right word, of having seen many parts of the world and dealt with it.
Mm-hmm.
And what I have found, visiting many Muslim countries, I was in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf over 50 years ago, when I thought Saudi then was absolutely terrible for many of the things that I didn't agree with.
Yeah.
But having said that, somebody posed the question about the existence of Israel. And for me, one thing I've found, and I feel very strongly about this, most Muslim countries that you visit, the average Muslim people there will treat you very well. They're very decent people.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is this. There is an element within the Muslim community of extremists, and they are the problem.
Yeah.
And if I give you some examples, do you know anything, for instance, about Marawi?
I don't, not a thing.
Well, Marawi is just one of many of the places which in the Philippines. If you look up on the internet, it was very similar to what's happening in Gaza, where there was a siege there, and they were cutting the heads off people who couldn't recite verses of the Quran.
Goodness me.
But then other places that I know something about, if you go to Nigeria, you'll find in the north, where most Muslims are, it's the Christians and the Muslims don't get on. There are terrible atrocities there, all through Africa. But then look at some of the other places. I remember going to Beirut, Lebanon, where they were fighting there. Nothing to do with Jews. It was the Muslims fighting the Muslims, Fatah and Hamas. If you look at Cyprus, it wasn't the Jews that invaded Cyprus. Look at India, where they couldn't get on with the Hindus, and it ended up with Pakistan.
Well, I think you make some really good points there, John. And I just wondered, we've got to go to break in a second, John, but what do you make of this point of these teachers in the schools who are teaching a pro-Palestinian agenda? They have a right to hold that opinion. I've absolutely no problem with freedom of thought, freedom of speech in this country, but teachers should be impartial in our schools. I wonder what you think about that, John.
100% agree with you. And they should be a bit more educated themselves. And many of these people, I don't think, have they been to a Muslim country. One of the kindest people I've ever come across, it was a long time before I even visited Israel. And I will say they were among the kindest people I've ever come across.
Okay, and you've been a
point, if I may.
You may, but I'm just pointing out, John, that you've been a heck of a lot of countries, so that's quite an endorsement. What's your final point, John?
Basically, about 2 years ago, I phoned Mike Graham, and I gave what I believe to be one of the answers to the illegal channel crossings, and it's very simple. We have some territory still in the Atlantic, Tristan da Cunha, St. Helena, the Ascension Isles. What is wrong? You tell me now why it wouldn't work if we put those people straight through to St. Helena.
Well, I think it would work. The people who may not be too happy about it are the St. Helenans, but there are only about 5,000 of them, and perhaps they could get over it. I don't know. But John, very interesting thoughts, and I appreciate them. That's John in Crewe there. Ian says Richard Tice talks a lot of sense. I'll vote, and I'll vote reform next time. Ian in York says the hotels, what a super comfortable environment to become or promote radicalisation in. Hooray for our governing bodies of whatever stripe. Common sense, says Ian in York. I think he's got his tongue in his cheek there. You better not joke too much about it though, because Deborah Fox will report you to the counter-terrorism police there. Sean in Edinburgh says watching Jeff Thompson's YouTube clip was just banter. I found it funny as well. There's an old saying, if you can't have a laugh then there's something wrong with you. That is the ones that reported Jeff to the police. It just wasted police time, says Sean in Edinburgh, which is absolutely correct. Dawn says, can you imagine if the Frankenstein's monster had reported the angry mob for hunting him with torches and pitchforks? Who's next? The Wolfman, says Dawn. I'm not sure the Wolfman is next, Dawn, but it's a decent point. Rob in Cheshire says, great show again. Thank you, Rob. If Deborah Fox is an example of the calibre of people in authority in this country, it's no wonder we're in the state we're in. I'd love to talk to Deborah Fox. I'd love to ask her. I'd love to say, Deborah, why did you report Jeff to the counter-terror police? Genuinely, did you think he was going to come to your house with a pitchfork and a torch? Really? Is that honestly what you thought? And Mark in Norfolk has been in touch about Shirley, who was on a little bit earlier on, and he says, bravo Shirley, that lady summed up how desperate most people are to see the back of Keir Starmer. Well, we'll be talking about Rachel Reeves, his Chancellor, and the EU trade relationship being more important than the US. I wonder what you think about that. 0344 499 1000. Plenty of time for more calls, texts, tweets and voice notes between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organisations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, just some breaking news from New York, and that is that Luigi Mangione, he has pleaded not guilty to all federal charges over the killing of United Healthcare Chief Executive Brian Thompson. You may remember that case. He faces 4 federal charges: murder, using a weapon with a silencer, and 2 counts of stalking. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. At the court in New York, he has pleaded not guilty to all federal charges over the killing of the Chief Executive of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. That's Luigi Mangione. We will bring you any more on that we get between now and 7 o'clock. And just to say, Jonathan Gullis is in the building. I've just been having a quick chat with him, and he is presenting in this chair between 7 and 10 tonight, sitting in for Kevin O'Sullivan. So the former Conservative MP, Jonathan Gullis, will be here between 7 and 10. He has a lot of strings to his bow. He's a former teacher as well, former yearhead. We had him on the programme yesterday. We'll have a quick chat with him in about half an hour's time to see what's coming up in his programme between 7 and 10. Should say I'm back tomorrow between 10 and 12:30, and then on Sunday between 10 and 1. So plenty of Cardi P in your life. If you want, you're very welcome to join me from 10 o'clock on both Saturday and Sunday. And before we speak to Jonathan, there's plenty to talk about here. Be sure to get your thoughts on the air as well. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk to Colonel Simon Diggins about what on earth is going on with the Ukraine peace talks. Can we see peace being there? The relationship between Trump and Putin and indeed Zelensky is a fascinating one. We'll make sure we get the latest on that from Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins. He's just a fantastic military analyst. But now I want to talk to David Hennig. He is the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. And that's because Rachel Reeves is in Washington at the moment. And there she has said that the EU trade relationship, the UK-EU trade relationship is more important than the US one. It's a very interesting move from her, David. I wonder what you make of it. You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you and good evening. Look, you know that this UK government is trying desperately to keep as many friends as possible with all the different players, the US, the EU, China. So I think that all she's doing is kind of a statement of fact, almost, of saying, look, the EU is the larger player than the US, but she's still trying to get a deal from the US, whatever Trump might offer, while the government's also trying to get a deal with the EU. I don't think there's any sign of a deal with China. So I think they're still trying to play all the different horses, if you like, at the same time, and hope that some of that sticks.
It is a game of three-dimensional chess in terms of trying to get a trade deal, both looking eastward to the EU and westward to the United States. How well has she done at the IMF over the past couple of days, do you think? To me, anyway, she seems a bit more relaxed than she often does in Britain, and she seems to be saying things that have slightly surprised me. For example, talking about green red tape, if such a thing exists, in regard to the bat caves and various things that have been done in regard to planning. It's sort of been quite an interesting series of remarks from Rachel Reeves, I would argue.
Well, I've been fairly critical in the past of this and previous UK governments, how they've approached trade and international engagement. But I actually thought to myself yesterday, they're doing okay on this one. I mean, insofar as anybody can work out what President Trump is going to offer in terms of trade, we seem to be in a reasonable place there. We're getting a little bit of a closer relationship with the EU, but I don't think it's not going so far in there. It's not crossing any of the red lines they spoke about. So I think they're making progress. But I think we'll 3-4 weeks time we'll see, have they got deals with the EU, with the US, or neither. We'll be able to see whether this is actually leading anywhere. But at the moment, there's a certain amount of promise, and it looks reasonably assured. I mean, Trump is not easy to play at all.
What do you think it looks like, David? What do you think a trade deal looks like? Do you think tariffs can be completely avoided, and when we're exporting things to the United States, that they can be sort of friction-free? Do you think that's a realistic ambition, or is that just totally out of the question?
Are you asking me to second-guess President Trump? I mean,
I am. Why don't you know the answer, David?
Then I don't look. Trump has said he's the tariff guy and he wants to make things in the US. On on that basis, he doesn't want us to be sending too many things. So he might give us a slightly better deal than others, but he's not going to give us a deal which means everything that could be made in the US is going to be made in the UK. He's been very clear that's not what he wants to do. So what we're in the business of here is trying to protect one or two sectors, which I would argue would be cars and pharmaceuticals, which might face high tariffs and where there's a lot of UK jobs. Try to protect those, maybe offer up, there's talk of offering up the digital services tax. At the same time, try and get a little bit more trade with Europe, try and get a little more trade globally as well. Let's talk again of an India trade deal. Just try generally to get a few more runs on the board, if you like, and see whether you can do that. But very much, as I say, the next month will be a test of whether Trump wants any deals at all. At the moment, it is looking like Trump is under some pressure to reach a deal, and he maybe thinks that the UK is a good country to reach it with.
I wonder as well, in terms of the fact that the economic aspect is so, certainly in the EU side and on the American side, it's so kind of intertwined with the defence aspect, Ukraine and so on. Could any of those other aspects of this be factors in regard to the trade deal, or do you think it's just straightforwardly trade? That's another lovely and perfectly straightforward question for you, David.
Everything factors in together. I'll be honest. I thought it was going to be more trouble with Trump on Russia, Ukraine. Okay. It's pretty clear that the UK government has not been in full agreement with him, but so far that doesn't seem to have affected the broader relationship, doesn't seem to have affected his keenness to do a trade deal with us. Normally this stuff can all leak into each other in trade deals. I'm afraid they're never just entirely about trade. They're always about lots of different things. So at the moment, it looks okay on that score, at least from the trade point of view. You're about to talk to somebody on the defence and security side, which I'd argue looks not quite so rosy. But on the trade side at the moment, it looks like maybe, at the very least, we won't do any worse than anybody else. Well, and that's something. Well,
David, that certainly is something, and thank you for your thoughts on that, including your answers to those absolutely impossible couple of questions there. David Hennig there, who is the UK Director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. Who knows what Trump will do? Does Trump know what he's going to do? Let me know your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. We'll talk to Colonel Simon Diggins in a second about what on earth is going on. Trump says we're pretty close to a Ukraine peace deal. Is that really the case? What about Zelensky? What does he say? Is this being done over the heads of the Ukrainians, and are they likely simply to say yes, especially when the constitutional and physical integrity of Ukraine is something that's being negotiated in a way that perhaps the Ukrainians don't want to happen? We'll also have a chat with Jonathan Gullis about what's coming up in his programme, and we'll take your calls as well. 0344 499 1000, whatever's on the tip of your tongue, whether you want to talk about pro-Palestinian teachers, whether you want to talk about that ludicrous story of Jeff being reported to counter-terrorism police, or about the Trump trade deal, you let me know. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we put out the clips now on social media of what I was talking to Jeff about a little bit earlier on, that absolutely ludicrous story. He made a complaint, he talked, well, he didn't even make a complaint, he just voiced his opinion on what was happening with a local issue in regard to how the Malvern Hills are governed and what was happening. He made a joke about pitchforks and torches and was reported to counter-terrorism police. Little bit of an overreaction there. James has been in touch. In fact, he's responding to the clip and says, "Hey Jeff, great interview with Peter Cardwell on Talk. I am so sorry for the utter and complete, I'll say, nonsense at this time of the evening you've had to endure recently, but like you said, it's shone a bright light on the despicable intimidation tactics that are used by some awful folk such as the Malvern Hills Trust." I'm sure they would deny that, but as they didn't put someone on air to actually refute or reject those allegations, well, we don't know. I'd love to talk to them. I'd love to talk to Deborah Fox, who's the chief executive. She's very welcome to come on my programme tomorrow, for example, between 10 and 12:30. James says, "Well done you to Jeff, and good luck to you and your family and all the work that you do. Kind regards, James." It's a very, very nice thing. Quite a number of other people getting in touch on that as well. And I just want to say a big thank you to our producer, Ryan Thrussell, who did an awful lot of work behind the scenes on that story, getting it to air, lots of checking, talking to people, talking to legal people, doing all the work that needs to be done. Ryan's an excellent producer, and I always feel very, very confident when I go on the air that he has my back. So thank you, Ryan, for being a good guy and a very good journalist as well. Angie says, "What happened to our once intelligent country, the country that invented so many things? A simple, courteous email or interview on Jeff's YouTube show would have solved the issue. No intelligent life exists in the UK now. I despair," says Angie. And Carol says, "I don't know, Angie, I hate this country now." And Janice says, "Hysteria seems to be rampant." Certainly Les has been in touch and says, "As regard a trade deal with the EU, why do we need one? It looks to me like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Fiat, Citroen, Porsche and the rest don't have any problem selling cars in the UK without a deal or redoing one with the corrupt EU. Explain why this is." Well, we will talk more about that, I'm sure, as time goes on. Certainly the defence relationship and all the problems and the ideas and the negotiation around Ukraine is something that is fascinating. In regard to Trump, there have been more meetings between Steve Witkoff, the negotiator, and indeed Vladimir Putin recently. Let's get into this now with Simon Diggins, Colonel Simon Diggins. He's a military and defence analyst and, of course, a very senior officer in the British Army previously. Simon, great to have you on with us, and you're always my number one guy to just explain this in layman's terms to people like me. And I just wonder, where are we with this? Because I keep hearing Crimea, I keep hearing about the acknowledgement of Crimea as part of Ukraine, of course, which it is. Russia has been there since 2014. And it seems to me, and this could be totally wrong, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Simon, because you're the expert, but it seems to me that Trump and his people are doing a deal with Putin kind of over the heads of the Ukrainians. It seems to me that things are being put forward. Trump keeps saying we're close. I'm not sure that Putin necessarily agrees with him, and I'm fairly sure Zelensky doesn't agree with him either. He seems to have been kept out of this process to some degree.
I think, unfortunately, Peter, good evening to you. I think that's exactly the situation. But that's been there from the very beginning. The attempt of Trump to try and have over-the-head deal, direct negotiation with Putin, Ukraine and the rest of the Europeans, including ourselves, kind of left out of it to the last moment. We had played a strong hand in terms of ensuring that Ukraine is represented the whole time. And we saw what happened the other day, and when the Americans then downgraded the meeting because they wouldn't have the Ukrainians basically in the room. It was an extraordinary place to get into. The issue about Crimea is slightly complex because it was given to Ukraine in the 1950s. I mean, it's traditionally been a very strong Russian ethnic area, not least which because that's where the Russian Black Sea Fleet was, the Soviet Black Sea Fleet, but ethnically it was there. But through some kind of whim of the Soviet Union authoritarians, they ceded the Crimea to Ukraine. So there is a sort of complex history to it. But the more complex bit we've got is that constitutionally, and this is where President Zelensky's hands are tied, perhaps against some of the pragmatists, is that constitutionally, no part of the Ukraine territory can be handed over to anybody else unless by a referendum. So that's the constitutional position he's in. So even if one wants to be completely pragmatic about it and have no sense at all about the kind of the sheer injustice of rewarding the aggression of Russia, there is a constitutional issue as well. And I suspect that's also one of the things that's holding up some of the negotiations. And it's a piece of detail which Putin and his team just seem to have completely ignored and disregarded.
And if there was a referendum, would that be everybody in Ukraine taking part in that referendum, or just the people of Crimea?
No, I think it's the whole, as I understand, it's the whole constitution. And the whole issue about referenda has now raised its head, in particular in relation to the 4 provinces, which are all partially occupied by the Russians, not least of which because a significant number of the population has been displaced and in some cases replaced by Russians as well. So there'd be no sense at all that if they're referendum or plebiscites on which country they're going to belong to, would be conducted fairly or not. It does also, of course, raise the political issue, which has always been sitting slightly in the background about the future of President Zelensky. Trump was very clear about it, and Putin's been very clear about it. They want him to go.
And in fairness, he has offered to go if a deal is done, but that's going to be a very, very difficult thing as well in terms of what he would accept in order to go.
No, I think that's right. And I think one of the challenges we've got when we look at this from the outside is essentially we're trying to do 2 things at the same time. And it's one of the reasons it's tripping over. The first conversation was really about, is there enough sort of goodwill, and it won't be very much, but enough goodwill on both sides, just have a straightforward ceasefire, stop the killing, stop the shooting, stop it, and then have a conversation about what the peace looks like. What we're trying to do at the moment, have both things at the same time. And I think it's all down to a completely false timeline, which is President Trump's desire to have something positive to say about what he's done in Ukraine for these first 100 days in office. I think that the answer probably, and I'm not, who am I to say, but would be some kind of ceasefire first, stop the killing, and then some of these issues, which are very long term and are very complex issues, can then be resolved in slightly slower time.
I think we are fairly clear on what Trump thinks about this. He's let us know in many different ways what his thoughts on this are. Where are we with what Putin thinks and has agreed to and will do, or is that still a bit of a mystery?
Well, I think he's a pragmatist, he's an opportunist, and he's pushing. There's no sense at all that in any way he's cutting back on the attacking that's going on. We saw horrific attacks on civilians over the weekend. 30 people killed in a bus attack, many more injured, and everything that goes there. He knows that in terms of just sheer attrition, Russia's always going to beat Ukraine over the long term. But he's not. We haven't got at the moment is the sort of the mass to kind of make a major change. So I think he's going to just keep pushing and just press that advantage, which is there with him pretty well the whole time, forcing Ukraine to be almost like a kind of permanent defensive from there. But what does he want? I mean, he wants as much of the Ukraine as he can get. What he also wants is Ukraine neutered, not just neutral, but neutered. So not a member of NATO, with no defence that's worth having there, and effectively, essentially again, a satrapy of Moscow. If you're looking for a model of what he envisages Ukraine being, look at what's happened to Belarus. Belarus, supposedly independent country, for all intents and purposes, just another province in the Russian Federation. That's what he really expects and wants from Ukraine.
Where is the UK in all of this? Anywhere?
Well, we seem to be slightly backtracking. Having been one of the lead countries in terms of trying to put together the force that might go in there to provide some security and resilience. I mean, I'm reading today, and it might change by tomorrow, but I'm reading today that we're no longer necessarily thinking about deploying forces, but deploying trainers onto the ground and everything that goes with it. So kind of backtracking from it. And I think we're still hung up on this idea that we can't deploy, we can't do anything unless the Americans are backing us up. I think that's naive. And I say that with somebody who actually had the honour of serving with the American Armed Forces and serving alongside them on many occasions. I have huge admiration for them. But we've got a different America from the one that we perhaps knew even a year or two years ago. The Americans want to do things differently and expect the Europeans to stand up for themselves. So I think what we have to do is actually say, right, what can we do? And let's just get on with it and do it. And it will be difficult, and it will be dangerous, and we'll be taking a risk. But fundamentally, there is no American guarantee that's worth the paper it's written on any longer. We have to accept that as reality of life and just get on with it.
Fascinating. Simon, thank you very much. That's Simon Diggins there, Colonel Simon Diggins, who's a military and defence analyst, obviously also a former senior military officer in the army. What do you think about this? So 344 499 1000. We've a bit of time left before Jonathan Gullis, of course, comes up between 7 and 10. I'll take some calls. If you want to talk about this, whatever you want to talk about, give me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us here on Talk.
So if you look at the housing companies that are making lots of money, the subcontractors, which are the hotels, then you get the non-governmental organizations that get funding from the government to help the asylum applicants. Then you get those charities across the country that are really sucking off the teat of council taxpayers' money because they're also receiving it. You look into an industry, an asylum industry, that is running roughly around £20 billion a year.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, you may remember Jeff Thompson spoke to us a little bit earlier on. This was about a dispute about how a local board runs the Malvern Hills. He made a joke about saying, oh, well, we disagree with this, time to get the pitchforks and the torches. This is what he said in a YouTube video.
So, Paul, what's next? What are we going to do? When do we start the fires and get the pitchforks?
Yes.
Not the fires, because you can't have a fire on the hills, can you? I've got a pitchfork and we've got a torch. That means we're together. But then suddenly it's like, oh no, we're actually with the people that have got this type of pitchfork, and we don't agree with the people that have got that type of pitchfork. And people forget that everybody's got pitchforks right now.
Well, it's clearly a joke. What happened next? Jeff was reported to counter-terrorism police. He spoke to me a little bit earlier on in the programme. This whole interview, I should say, is now on YouTube if you want to watch the whole thing. But let's just get a flavour of what Jeff told me a little bit earlier on.
The day that I found out that counter-terror police had been mentioned, I actually texted my wife and said, quite seriously, I might need to get out of the country here, and you might then need to fly out and join me. That's how serious the conversations were in our house, because I know the way this country has gone, particularly in the last 18 months. And there was a very serious moment where I was going, oh, hang on a minute, maybe I'm in a bit of trouble here. And which is odd to say, knowing full well that I had done nothing wrong and I had said nothing inflammatory. But to react that way and to the wife and I came upstairs, left the kids downstairs, and we're like, right, what is the actual situation here? They're talking counter-terror police. If I'm being branded as a domestic terrorist, this could be very serious. And I was genuinely thinking, do I need to run for the border right now? It's pretty scary.
Absolute madness. Cindy in Michigan has given me a ring about this, so 344 499 1000. Cindy, what do you think?
I think it is pure madness, Peter. I think it's ridiculous that he could have been reported for clearly what was a joke. But I understand how serious this could have gotten. And for what? There's a lot of real crime going on, and it bothers me that this such a thing could be reported.
In fairness to
the police, yes.
Yeah, they said, look, there's nothing to see here. This is an overreaction, and we're not. This isn't a crime. Nothing's happened here, and that's what the police should be doing to these people who overzealously do this. I think, Cindy, they should just say, do you know what? No crime has been committed. Off you go. We'll monitor this, but nothing more is going to be done.
But then you think about the woman who is still sitting in jail over, a naughty Facebook post that she made. It was naughty, but she deleted it, and she still sits in jail, and that's ridiculous. And it scares me because, I am coming to visit, and I think, you have skyrocketing cell phone crime right now, where people are snatching phones at a ridiculous, alarming rate. Why aren't the police focusing on the real crime? And how could this be affecting tourism when future tourists hear this? It's making me scratch my head. I'm still coming.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. But there will be others who will be put off. Cindy, you're welcome in this country anytime, and please come and spend all your dollars here because we need them. Thank you for your thoughts there. That's Cindy in Michigan there. Georgina in London has been in touch as well. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Georgina, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Good afternoon to you.
Hi there.
I've been listening to all this about the fighting with Ukraine and Russia and Trump trying to sort things out between them both. And I wish I could get Putin and Zelensky in a room and let them sort it out between themselves, because do you know what? If it was their children who were out on these battlefields fighting and being slaughtered, I think this would have come to an end a lot quicker. These are not Zelensky's and Putin's kids, and it's not their dads who are going out fighting.
So do you think Trump should be involved or not involved? Should we be involved in the United Kingdom, Georgina?
I don't think that we should. Do you know what? Britain has got big problems, Peter, of its own with the crime that's going on in Britain. I think that Britain should concentrate for once on Britain. I know that sounds really selfish, and I'll probably be hated for saying it.
I think it's a perfectly reasonable thing, especially when in America, Donald Trump is saying quite simply, America first. Why shouldn't it be Britain as the priority?
Oh, Peter, I'm so glad you have said that, because honestly, I was frightened to call in and say that, but I thought, no, I'm going to say it. It's about time that Britain looked after Britain and stop poking its nose into matters which, quite frankly, it doesn't need at the moment. Listen, I'm not saying that these people don't need help. They do need help. But you know what? You've got to help yourself before you can help anyone else. This country is in a terrible state with crime. We've got all sorts of terrible things going on here. We need to sort out before we start going and trying to sort things out in other countries. But this killing and these wars, I mean, it's the 21st century, Peter. Have we learned nothing over the centuries? War does not help anyone. All it does is kill children, adults, loved ones, mums and dads, This is not the way forward for any civilized society. We have got to start learning by our mistakes. And we're not. This is what frightens me. The human race is not learning by past mistakes. And I find that unbelievable. Now, Trump, bless him, he's in his 70s. He's an old boy for all his bravado. And he wants to stop the slaughter. He doesn't care about which side is the best side or who's the good boy and who's the bad boy. He really doesn't care. He cares about your normal man on the street, woman on the street, child on the street, on both sides, Russian and Ukraine, stopped being slaughtered. He's had enough, and quite frankly, we should all feel that way. There's no winners and losers in this. The damage that's been done already, Peter, is irreparable. It's irreparable damage.
Yeah.
There's families who have been decimated on both sides by this war, and they will never recover. It's time now that people gave old Trump a little bit of credit for saying, listen, guys, enough is enough.
Well, it has to end in some way. The war has to end. It absolutely has to end in some way. There has to be an end to it. Peace talks are a good idea, making sure that we are certainly doing our duty as a country, but also ensuring, I think, Georgina, ensuring as well that, Russia stops doing what it's doing, that Ukrainians can live in peace. And it worries me that for such a long time people didn't talk about peace. They kept saying, let's send more and more money to Ukraine. We send about £3 billion a year. Rachel Reeves says that will continue. And some people might think that's fine, but at the same time the war has to end in some regard, so we will see what happens with those peace talks. Georgina, thanks so much for your thoughts on all of that. I'm back tomorrow between 10 and 12:30, and then on Sunday between 10 and 1. And just after the news, Jonathan Gollis is going to be with us. Hi, Jonathan. You all right?
I'm good, buddy. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. It's been quite a show today. I don't know if you've seen the story about Jeff Thompson and the pitchfork joke. It is absolutely crazy. He makes a joke about, let's get the pitchforks and the torches. He gets reported to counter-terrorism police. In fairness to Westminster police, they say, none to see here, no crime's been committed, off you go. But it does show the complete overreaction, I think, of a number of people.
It's getting quite tragic, isn't it, really, that in a society we just can't have a bit more common sense, a bit more calm, and remember that Britain is built on sarcasm and dark humour, and let's just enjoy that rather than constantly looking to police it.
You know the difference between someone who makes a sarcastic remark and the person who doesn't get it? It's called the sarcasm. There we go. Right, what's coming up in your programme, Jonathan?
Well, what a show we've got. We've got two amazing guests in Benjamin Butterworth and Matthew Talbot in the studio with me. So I'm surrounded by lefties.
Yes.
In the studio and behind the glass too, which I'm looking forward to. But straight away at 7, we're going to have Lord Michael Gove. His first interview since becoming a peer of the House of Lords on the show, talking about the future of the Conservative Party. We've got Jake Richards, MP for Rother Valley in Labour, talking about the Labour growth group and does he or think not that the Reform are a real threat in the Red Wall. And then Danny Kruger, who was the campaign manager for Robert Jenrick. Well, hasn't that individual been making lots of news this week? So let's ask Danny whether or not is Robert really on campaign manoeuvres still?
Well, you say it was the campaign manager. I mean, I wonder if Robert Jenrick has ever actually stopped campaigning.
That's certainly a question we were asking Danny, as well as obviously looking at the Sun exclusive about the ridiculous fact that one hotel chain is raking £700 million off the British taxpayer by basically becoming a luxury resort for illegal migrants. What a joke that is to our system, what a joke it is to the taxpayer, and also what bad type of corporatism that really is. The damage that's been done to that communities, with its tourism, with its hospitality, with its leisure and retail sector, all because some greedy fat cats at the top are trying to make a quick buck off this misery in human trade.
And there's so many people as well. I mean, we've had people contacting us today on that story, for example, saying, hold on, where's the fairness here? You know, I pay my taxes and they take my winter fuel allowance away, for example. I can't afford to go to those hotels. Those are the kind of places that we maybe go once a year for Mother's Day or something like that, a nice meal out. We can't afford to stay there. We're not going to stay there for a week. We're not going to go to classes like that. I just find time and time again with the stories that we cover, the kind of voices that we have on these programmes, and they're so welcome because they point out that fairness is absolutely at the heart of so many of those stories.
Well, absolutely. In places that you know very well over in Northern Ireland, places I know like Stoke-on-Trent very well, these communities face deprivation, have seen a loss of their industry and not seen the new jobs come with it. And what do they want in return? Just a little bit of love. Their high streets tidied up, their bins collected regularly, they want to have a better bus service, they want to see the schools looking shiny and new with good quality teachers, they want to be able to get to that GP appointment. And let's not forget that this is 700 million quid. Rachel Reeves has just slapped a £500 million tax on British farming through this family farm tax. Well, there's the money right there that wouldn't have been needed to squeeze British farming to death in order to cover the bill of illegal migrants being housed in cosy hotels. It is just completely absurd, and I feel for the British people. And then we've got Rachel Reeves again on the plane, on the way to America, bizarrely telling everyone that the EU trade deal that she wants is far more important than the US one that she's seemingly going to negotiate. I'm not sure that's the best negotiation tactic.
Strange way of perhaps doing that, but maybe she's being realistic, Jonathan. What do you think?
Well, look, maybe she's being realistic, but I think the problem is that what it seems to be doing is a deal that's being announced after the locals appears to therefore already be done. Why is Keir Starmer waiting to after the local elections to announce this deal? And secondly, does it mean that we're going to be